So overall, the idea is to also equip us to be able to work better together. So we've attracted a lot of attention, although not everyone who has signed up has participated. I think we're building a pretty good framework to be able to do some more work in the space of bringing us together. So I just want to encourage everyone to look out for more from us as we move forward, because this is just the beginning of what we hope to be a longer term process. But with that said, today I am personally really excited about the training because we're going to be talking about monitoring and evaluation, and there are a few different terms that this is looked at as. But one of the things that I will just say off the bat that I think is really important, a lot of times we're doing things and exercising skills and having the language and some of the basic tools so that we know what we mean when we say monitoring and evaluation, for example, to make it a bit less subjective and more widespread, making those terms more accepted. It's really important to the development of the sector because we're in a place naturally where we all do things a little bit differently, and it just helps us to be able to collaborate when we have an understanding of what we mean and how we approach concepts like this. We're super excited to have representatives from the Templeton World Charity join us today to facilitate this training and allow them to introduce themselves. Is that okay? Yeah, so, and they will walk us through what I will call an informal but impactful crash course in this space. So the only thing that I would ask, Zoom, I will be on monitoring. So if you have any questions or comments throughout the day, feel free to send them over in the chat. And to just give our full participation, because I'm getting the vibes from the toys and evaluations and all the things that are already going on, that participation is probably going to make the session, is going to maximize the impact. So I just encourage everyone to participate, and while the experts are here, to ask any questions that you may have, and let's make it a great day. So let's welcome our guest from the Templeton World Charity, everyone. Hoorah!
I feel like I can kind of leave now because you did the intro so well. And it touched on a lot of points that I would have touched on.
Yeah.
So to get us started, I really want to harp on the fact that this is a very informal training. It's kind of a conversation. We want you to talk back to us because the objective for us, our main objective is the engagement, trying to help you think through these concepts as well as guide you. When you leave here, you can go back to your organizations and develop your own things. So my name is Angelica Monroe. I am a program associate at Templeton World Charity Foundation, which is a donor funding organization based in the Bahamas. I've been doing monitoring and evaluation for about 10 plus years in nonprofits, government, and now as a funder or a donor. So I think I know a little, a bit of information that I can kind of impart to you today. And I think I'm going to hand it off to Amanda, and then we'll do a fun kind of icebreaker. Sure.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda. I am not the Amanda with Templeton Religious Trust, so I'm sorry to disappoint anybody who came in here thinking that that's who I was. I'm actually not with Templeton at all. I am a principal consultant with the Pelagic Group, which is a Bahamas-based international development consulting firm. So I have, over 13 years experience facilitating, doing project management, and by extension, doing extensive monitoring and evaluation work. More monitoring, less evaluation, but still some experience there. So really excited to get into this with you all today. For those on Zoom, you heard Stefan talk about a toy. I'm sorry you're not able to participate with it. It is here on the table, but we will, maybe we can zoom on to it. There we go. So we have some toys. It serves a purpose. It's not just to add to the aesthetics of the room. And we will get into explaining how we've been using these toys. So that is us, I think.
Yeah. Let's start with the icebreaker. I guess we can start with this gentleman over here. So what's gonna happen? And Steph did tell us that, you guys kind of know each other already. So I guess this is more for our benefit. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna toss the ball around to someone, and you're going to introduce yourself, So your name, your organization, what's your role in your organization, and then you're going to tell us something fun about you. So something like what's your favorite travel destination, or what's your favorite food, just something fun and exciting that no one knows in this room. And the next person that gets the ball, you have to do the same, but you also have to tell us what that person said. So before you. So every person before you. So he's lucky because he's starting. So I guess we can test it out. So I'll do it again.
Okay.
My name is Andrika. I am from Templeton Rural Charity Foundation. I am a program associate, and my dream travel destination is Bali.
This is Andrika. Her dream travel destination is Bali. I used to be really good at this, but I haven't. She is a program associate with Templeton, and my name is.
I would like to go everywhere, but something fun is a friend of mine who's traveling to Europe today just asked to borrow a suitcase. So my suitcase is going to Europe for this summer. So I'm gonna live vicariously through that suitcase.
Good morning, everyone. This is Amanda. Where you did. Oh, yes. My name is Martin Jean-Pierre. I teach here. I am the head of the foreign language department at the I work with the Haitian community here in the Bahamas, but my organization primarily intervenes in Haiti, working with transition, trying to provide access to education to Haitian children and rural areas in Haiti. And it's what we with. Again, my name is Martin Jean-Pierre, and the delegation is busy.
Tell me something you remember. So you're.
Andrika?
Where do I want to go?
Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah.
and you didn't give a fun something not related to your organization, not related to your work, just something fun. You like to do sports?
Yeah, I am a fan of the what we call the real football. Soccer.
Yeah.
Soccer. So based on that, my travel risk is waiting for them for the very thing. And basically soccer.
He wants to go to Brazil because he is a fan of football.
Okay.
Okay.
Not American football.
Real football. Baseball. Baseball.
Good morning. My name is Lydia. Marcus Pierre. This is the go to. That's it. But he is the professor here at UB. He is associated very in depth with Haiti and the Haitian community here. And
What about this one here? It's like Monday, I have to like fully describe. Yeah.
that's okay. Going to Europe, where he hopes to be able to go soon.
And my name? Andrika. Where am I going?
Bali,
Yes.
I wish I could go with you.
Come on. I'm on your fun facts.
I love Cuba.
You know, and your name. And then I'm gonna take the ball from you and virtually throw it to somebody over here.
Zoom, I hope you're. My heart is like.
You're not doing your best. I hope you know. Just do your
Okay.
best.
Can I pray?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Freya. I'm the and you want me to recall first? Okay, so this is Lydia. You can decide to use it. Yeah, you guys. Here's the ball. Okay. No, Templeton World Charities.
Okay, I'm.
This is the organization, yeah.
So, something about my organization.
You wanna know you?
Okay, for me, I'm a boy mom, and something fun about me, I also like taco actually, but I am definitely a foodie. Yeah. I'm here on my diet. Yes.
Okay. So I am throwing the ball to Kirkwood. Go Kirkwood, your turn. Hi. Can you hear me?
I think so. Kirkwood, are you there?
Well, this is Dario. I'll go while
Okay.
Kirkwood get himself together. Now, the only name I could remember is Miss Monroe. Okay. All the others I could not hear too clearly your name. But my name is Dario Maycock. I am with the Man of Tomorrow, Man of Today, Man of Tomorrow mentoring program, which is a empowered man mentoring at-risk boys and young men program. And my dream location is to tour the Holy Land. And I hope one day, one of the things that nobody know about me is that I hope one day to retire in Ragged Island and develop an anchor fisher project there. I'm so sorry I didn't hear everybody else input, but that's it for me.
Are Monroes and Majors related? I mean, Maycock's related, right?
Definitely,
Right,
definitely.
Okay,
We-
I'm
we-
a
we-
married Monroe. So I know that.
Oh, you married a Monroe?
Married a Monroe, yeah. A
N-
ragged,
Nothing wrong with, nothing wrong with that.
okay, still family. Let's move on to.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, before you move on, I
Okay.
am Kirkwood Simmons. I'm on twice. Actually, I'm on my work computer, but that doesn't have a microphone, so I had to come on my cell phone. I'm just here to find out what all the young people are doing. God bless you.
Any Zoom? Can you please put on Zoom? Can we see that? I just want to make sure I don't miss anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah? Did I say your name right? And I apologize if I didn't. Ravinia?
Oh, yeah, that's not.
Yes. Hi, good morning. I'm Ravinia Hanna, representing BAMSI, and as Deacon Simmons would have said, the young people in the house too. I'd like to think I'm there. In terms of, I guess my dream place would be, I'd like to visit Japan, but I'm really looking forward to the discussions and the information that will be shared. So again, that I can then translate and transfer to our student body. Thanks so much.
Thank you for being on. Did we get everyone on Zoom?
I think so.
Yep. Okay. I hope you remember it. That was really hard. You don't have to say the Zoom. Okay. Can we do this? Support, but not right now. My name is Susan McKenzie. I'm with SCDC Vancouver. I am the project advocate. And an organizational fun fact, we also celebrated a milestone year, 5 years for Anathon. So we're celebrating this. So let's see. It's the name. Okay, country from Amanda.
Jean-Pierre.
From yeah, Lydia, Ajua. Okay, I'm Dr. Neil. I am the admin manager for ORC 100. And some facts about me is that I was full-time in motivation for documentary. So for the persons before me, we have Judith, Ajua, Lydia, Vivier, Amanda, and Angelica. Dulcinea. Yeah. Hi, I'm Vanessa. Running water. Like for environment. Before me was Dulcinea. We've got Judith, organizational contact with, celebrated by the years. That you, do you want me to say that? Well, what was Tracy and Kirkwood, Dario, and then more that, it was his plan. To and on my what I had to say. And then there's Miss Lydia, who wants to go on cruises. And then we've got Miss Columbia, that's her one mission partner. And then we have the OG. Who's what is going to do Europe. And then we have Enrica, who's the program committee, something else there with us. And then one involved.
Amanda decided going to Europe. Mr. Pierre wants to go to Brazil, loves it at fall. Miss Lydia loves it with cruise. Miss Claire, boy mom, foodie, likes travel. Judith, and that place, about years. That's near the true fun, jumpy. Vanessa. The island of so that's you and me. I'm Chris. I'm Chris. I'm the communications officer at Ford. My fun fact is I lived a decade in Asia. Mostly China, Shanghai, Nanjing, Beijing, Guangdong, Wuhan, Suzhou, Thailand, Bali. Oh. It's fun. If you go, like at least spend like 2 weeks. I'm gonna call you. Mostly Mandarin, because all of those countries, they have to speak Mandarin. It's a Chinese language. Yeah, it's the official language of Asia, it's not English for our side. Cool. Amanda. Yeah. John. Lydia. Judith. I am Stephanie. The president of the sport and the pieces of the very program. Okay.
I'm going, can y'all let us know if the mic placement is better, for the folks at the, hearing the folks at the back?
Yes.
I left off, yeah, it was left the Bahamas, and I'm gonna use part of the excuse. But I'll go with some of them, all right? Chris. Chris. Yes. Nessa. And. That was strong. Yeah, I'm strong. Then we have Judith. And we have Gina. Oh, I go to Jewel, okay. And then Jean here. Oh, okay, I want to go people leave, all right?
connections with ABA stuff. Amanda and Adrena.
Andrika.
So, anyhow, I am with Vanessa Muhammad. We teach our government school kids how to swim. And I'm gonna tell you what's not really my favorite vacation, but this is where I'm going for 2 weeks. So it's gonna be my favorite vacation for the next 2 weeks. We're taking all our grandkids and all our kids and spouses on a cruise. A lot of people think my suitcases already. But yeah, that's me, that's what we do. And I made it release my wife, which she should be able to remember my name.
Andy, Stephanie, Chris, and that's, Judith,
Andrika. I tried. I have a lot
So we're going on the cruise. And I'm already.
How many kids, how many grandkids?
I have 4 children and
Yes.
Morning, I'm Amanda. To remember Back to Bahamas. I'm also a volunteer with the Bahamas Service. And I decided to find back about me, and I can figure that and I'm on the track.
Gives us,
I feel like I know everyone, but that makes the person higher. Yeah.
Andrika, who wants to go to Bali, Amanda, who is with thank you. Europe, yeah, is popular in Victoria, who like tourists like my family, so I'm not gonna forget that. This land about modern food here. We love having some celebrations. I don't remember, I'm sorry. Chris, who spent all his time in these countries, and that's what was Rita and Queen, we're taking up on and Amanda, who volunteers with the state. Everybody? Stephanie? Stephanie. Oh, yeah, okay, we did it. Stephanie. Who's fine. Oh, did you want to go to
Yes.
Yeah, okay. My name is Syria. I'm with the National Guard Gathering in Bahamas. I'm the Dedication Outreach Department now. And my fun fact is I have 26 siblings. With my husband has 26 siblings. Wow. That's crazy. It's fine. Well, that means we alone by himself and that's great. All right. I'm going to try my best. Step on the bag. I can even pour you as well.
I know you. You were a lot.
All right. I'm going to run the valley. Amanda is with my parents. Good to see you again. Love real football.
Yes.
The one that the rest of the world calls football. Lydia likes cruises.
Ajua is on a mango diet. Judith, they're coming back at BBC, they're covering 5 years. Yeah, we live with Aura and love your friend. Vanessa, who I remember where I know you from now, you used to work in the back. Yeah. I know about all the things. This is Chris. Chris has done a lot, 10 years in Asia with Stephanie. She wants to go to Europe. We have Andy and Nancy who work through, Bahamas. So Bahamas are going on a major cruise the entire country, that's your heart. This is Amanda gone to work with Sailing Club here. This area, who is my colleague, community, community, sorry. Sorry, my brain. I'm massive number of in-laws, and I am Katrina. I am also the National Art Gallery Bahamas. I am the education manager there, and we are also celebrating a really huge milestone. We are celebrating our 20th anniversary. So very excited about that, and fun fact about me, fun thing. I am actually a professional ceramic, and my dream is to do a ceramic residency in Japan one day. Okay.
And last, favorite. Oh, there's 2 more certain people.
So we have,
I think it's
oh.
one song. So maybe-
Yeah. Oh, Keisha had one song, but she fell off, so she may be back. I think that may be 1 minute, I'm not sure.
Okay,
From Hands from Hunger.
Hans Behunger. No, yes, no.
I thought it might come on.
You got this.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
You got it.
Okay.
Take it away.
Just give
I'm
it.
gonna-
Got it. You know all of these people.
I'm gonna try to not love, but then I don't want to offend anyone if you see me.
No one's offended.
So, of course, I'm gonna start this way. So, Vika Templeton, we're a charity. Bali is the dream location. Amanda, and fun fact, traveling suitcase. Dr. Jean Pierre, UV, wants to go to Brazil to see the real, I'm called the real football. Lydia, fun fact is the final cruising,
Mhm.
Ajua, SBDC, Boy Mom, mine with A. Judith, also at PDC, we shared the 5-year anniversary, coming up. Well, I know my name, Delphine. It's one of our rock stars. Crime documentary. Vanessa, who was, you were, I guess, island stuff. So, things that I also enjoy a lot. Chris lived in all over Asia, countries. Andy, from the swing. Boston rooms with family. And then Nancy, I believe you said 4 days bigger.
Mhm.
The other Amanda in the room. Don't tell me.
Wrong.
No. Can I look down to the?
No, no.
Okay. Well, then.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yes. Okay.
Did you catch that Jaws reference?
I've also done those things enough.
If you're a parent, you do baby shark.
Then next after Amanda, yeah, so Syria, NAGB, 26 siblings in law.
Crazy.
But very cool. Katrina, I could not forget one of the coming answers, really cool ceramics residency Japan.
Yeah.
So Stephanie from Central Park Ministry also wants to probably, so, well, I guess the names are here.
Yeah. So,
But,
fun fact about you.
oh, fun fact about me. I think people are normally shocked when they hear of a 1-year-old, they look pretty young. But that's like that's my conversation piece right now. That I'm learning life again as a parent of a very small child.
Mhm. Oh, many zombies in here today then. Okay. Maybe we can talk to Andy and Nancy a little later about how to navigate toddler life. Yeah. Well, that was fun. So, without further ado, Stefan, I'm gonna give you a little minute.
Okay.
You're doing such a great
Oh,
job.
thank you. I gotta pin everybody.
I know, I've noticed. I was like, brought the right swag today for you, Stephanie. Okay, so we're gonna jump right into it. We're gonna talk about what is monitoring evaluation. That's how we're gonna start. Oh, share the screen.
Okay. There's so many things on the screen right now.
While Stefan is doing that, I'm gonna just say that this first session is very definition heavy. Because it's basically framing what is monitoring evaluations. Stefan mentioned that, there are many kind of definitions, there are many acronyms for monitoring evaluation. I've heard M&E, I've heard MLE, which is monitoring, learning, evaluation. I've heard MEL, which is monitoring, evaluation, learning. And the last one, most recently, is MEAL, which is monitoring, evaluation, assessment, learning, which is all basically saying the same thing. So we're just gonna define what all of that encompasses in this first session. And like I said, this is an informal training. So if something doesn't make sense to you, please stop me. Amanda and I are happy to kind of answer questions and help you think through or clarify something for you. It's not moving. How does it move? Maybe. There we go.
Oh, and then just real quick. The cool thing that we aren't often able to figure out if you ever want to. Yeah, that works.
So fancy.
For some reason, no one else has been able to.
I feel like I just want to stand here and be like, not oppressed. Okay. So real quick, our session overview, we're gonna, like I said, define monitoring evaluation. We're gonna talk about the types of monitoring and the types of evaluation, and then we're gonna illustrate why M&E is even important. So the purpose of monitoring evaluation is to track progress, to assess progress made towards goals, to summarize your project or your program design. And when M&E is well done, you get really good quality of data, you get a good story for your project or program that can help you garner more funding or just disseminate your findings more readily or more easily. So what is monitoring? And you're gonna get these slides afterwards, so you don't have to take pictures, and you'll have all of my notes, all of my talking points. So after the training session, you'll get all of this information. So what is monitoring and what is evaluation? So monitoring, like it says on the screen, it's basically tracking changes in program performance over time. And evaluation is assessing whether objectives have been met or assessing the extent to which a program is responsible for observed changes. So it's important to distinguish between monitoring and evaluation. Although they are coupled, they are two distinct kind of activities which have different tasks. So most of what we do I think Amanda mentioned, most of what we do in NPO in the Bahamas is more monitoring. We rarely get into the evaluation, the impact of what we actually do. Evaluation is more of, like I said, what your project is hoping to accomplish. What goals can you attribute to your project design? And many experts they're very strict about what is monitoring and what is evaluation. And so this slide is giving us the ground rules. So when I say M&E, this is what I mean. Monitoring, we're tracking. Evaluation, we're assessing our impact. To dive a little deeper, monitoring is a routine tracking of information about a program or project and its intended outputs and outcomes. And some of the terminology, or most of the terminology, we'll go through a bit later. So you'll understand what is an outcome and what is an output and what is an impact from our perspective. Monitoring is a measurement of progress towards achieving your goals or your objectives, which mostly involves counting of things, counting what we're doing. So again, harping on tracking of things. You're tracking things like costs and personnel and implementation time, organizational development, even kind of your economic and financial results. So in monitoring, we're measuring things closely to what we hope to achieve, to what we are actually achieving. And that's how of your engagement. Our next slide. Can everyone on Zoom hear me clearly? Yeah. Okay. So
Yes, be clear.
thank you. So there are 7 types of monitoring: results, activity or process monitoring, compliance monitoring, situational, which is sometimes called context monitoring, beneficiary monitoring, financial monitoring, and organizational monitoring. But for our purposes and just my experience with Bahamian NPOs, we're going to focus on the 4 that are in orange. So results, activity, situation, beneficiary. So before I kind of I spoon feed you the definitions, I want to test your intuition. So on our left, they're the types of monitoring that we just talked about that we're going to hone in on. And on our right is statements. So let's read. If anyone could tell me, look at the board, and you can let's match the statement to the type. So you can raise your hand. You can, if you want to answer, that would be great. Or even on Zoom. Beneficiary monitoring. Which statement do you think best align with beneficiary monitoring? Is it you want to determine whether financial assistance is effective in reducing child labor? Is it determining the potential impact of armed conflict at the border on project? Determine whether financial assistance is delivered to target households? Or is it determining whether schools are satisfied with the program? C, determining whether financial assistance is delivered to target households? Schools? Yeah. So it's the last one, determining whether schools are satisfied with the program. We get the gist of what we're doing? Okay, results. Which statement do you think best aligns with results monitoring? Financial assistance effective, potential impact of armed conflict at the border, financial assistance delivered to target households. Amanda? Yes, good job. Lastly, context. Which one do we think best aligns with the context? Financial impact for context? Oh, potential impact. Yes, and easily process is determining whether your financial assistance is delivered to household targets. Good job, guys. So to clearly define what those 4 monitoring types are, So results is monitoring that tracks effects and impacts. This is where monitoring merges with evaluation to determine if a project or a program is on target towards its intended results. So outputs, outcomes, and impact. And whether there may be unintended consequences or an impact, and that can be both positive or negative. And so an example of this in kind of our context is maybe there's a community development program and they're monitoring activities to achieve the outputs that will contribute to like community resilience. So they're trying to build community resilience. They're tracking their impact. Does that make sense? Yeah. Process monitoring or activity monitoring is exactly what it sounds like. You're monitoring and tracking your inputs or your resources, the progress of the activities to deliver your outputs. And it examines how activities are delivered and the efficiency in time and resources. It's often conducted in conjunction with compliance monitoring and feeds into the evaluation impact. So an example of this can be a water and sanitation project may monitor that targeted households receive septic systems according to the schedule. So you're tracking your actual activities, the things that you're doing. Situational or context. Monitors or tracks the setting in which the project operates. So if you remember for our example, we were looking at conflict at a border. So it's really honed in on like the location or where you're actually implementing your activities. It affects, identifies risk and assumptions, but also unexpected considerations that may arise. So things that may halt your program or things that may help your program. It includes the field as well as the larger political or institutional funding and policy context that affects your program or your project. Again, an example of this is a project that's located in a conflict-prone area may monitor potential fighting that could, like I said, affect the project or endanger staff. And so you have to track those kinds of activities or situations. And lastly, beneficiary monitoring. So beneficiary monitoring is tracking your beneficiary's perception of your project or your program. It's really honing in on your beneficiary satisfaction or complaints. And it's sometimes considered or called beneficiary contact monitoring, and often includes stakeholder complaints and a feedback mechanism. It should take into account different populations and groups that you engage with, and not only direct beneficiaries, but also indirect beneficiaries. And so again, an example, a real world example, let's say we have a cash for work program that's assisting community members after a natural disaster. You may want to monitor how people feel about the way that you implemented this program. Who got the assistance? Why did they get the assistance? Do they feel as though this was done equitably? So that's the kind of information you're tracking when you're talking about beneficiary tracking. So I've said a lot about monitoring, and I think the general message is we're just tracking things, we're counting things. This is our quantitative, sometimes qualitative data, right? So we're going to move into evaluation, which I think takes more of their brain power, right? It's because it's really the story of what you actually did and trying to convey that to others. So what is evaluation? There are many kind of different definitions of evaluation, but the final message or the key message is it is assessing your impact. It is a social, it requires social research methods. So systematically investigating how well your program activities have met your expected outcomes. Evaluation requires a special study of design. And sometimes it requires a robust study design that includes a comparison and a control group. The word evaluation is very broad, like I said, and so there are many definitions, and these are just a few that I have up on the screen. And so it can get a bit complicated. But I think what helps it to be more digestible is when you go down and you dwindle down into the techniques and when you actually do the evaluation. So that's what we're going to look at next. So these are the 4 main types or techniques of evaluation. And this isn't really speaking to when you do these, but just approaches to evaluation. So you can do real-time evaluation, and that's like what it says. It's evaluation undertaking during the implementation to provide immediate feedback so that you can make modifications to your program. There's an emphasis on learning, so learning as you go, more than what my actual impact is. It's more about, am I doing this right? If not, what can I do differently? There's thematic evaluation. So this focuses on specific themes. So things like gender issues or the environment, youth unemployment, and it usually looks at different projects or programs at your organization for the overall theme. So there may be multiple programs working, but they're all under one theme and you're evaluating that aspect of it. So what is the impact that all of these projects are making towards this theme or towards addressing this problem within the thematic area. Then there's impact evaluation, which I feel like everyone has heard before. And that focuses more on the long-term outcomes rather than the immediate. As a result, it's usually carried out after the completion of the project. It's either considered a final evaluation or an ex post evaluation, and we'll talk a little bit more about this too. And counterfactual techniques are used to attribute an impact or outcome to your project. So I know we throw around that word or the term impact evaluation, but impact evaluation really speaks to longer term, not immediate, not midterm. It's those things that are years out from your project. And the last technique is meta evaluation. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's an evaluation of evaluations. So you're taking stock of all the evaluations that you might have done.
The mountains could be gorgeous today with that 70 degrees. It'll be
Weather report. I know we're tracking a storm, but okay. Yeah, okay, so we're taking stock of evaluations and trying to find those kind of common trends or those areas where you can improve the next iteration of your project. And so it assesses whether evaluations are being disseminated and used to promote institutional learning. And like I said, it helps to identify general trends based on the analysis of several evaluations. All right, types of evaluations. And I'm like breezing through this. Like I said, very definition heavy, but this will help us when we actually have to do the work. You understand like what these terms mean. So there are techniques and then there are types, and types speak more to the time. So if you guys have been working as an NPO or NGOs for quite some time, so I know you've heard of things like midterm evaluations, final evaluations, formative evaluations. And so these types happen on a timeline of your project, right? So for ex ante evaluation, that happens before you implement anything. It happens while you're trying to figure out your project design. It helps you to determine or understand, verify is probably a better word, if what you're doing is actually relevant. Should I even take this forward? So that's what ex ante means. Formative evaluation occurs during your implementation, and that's very similar to the real-time evaluation. It's helping you to pinpoint areas where you can improve and verify your compliance. Midterm evaluation is a form of formative evaluation. It's informing your project again. And you only conduct a midterm evaluation if your project or your program is 2+ years. So shorter programs or shorter projects, they don't require a midterm evaluation. Then there's retrospective, and sometimes it's called summative evaluation. It summarizes, and it's carried out at the end of your implementation and measures the effectiveness of the impact of your program or project. And just like midterm is a formative, final is a summative. So final is a summative evaluation and is often conducted by an external or an independent evaluator. So summative evaluator can be done in-house, right? You can summarize your project, but to get, I guess, unbiased information or insight, your final evaluation should be done by someone, an unbiased party, a third party evaluator. And so the final evaluation occurs after the completion of your project, and assesses the extent to which your plan objectives have been achieved. And lastly, ex post evaluation. And I have to be very honest, I have never seen a project, at least in the Bahamas for sure, that has done an ex post evaluation, because it's carried out after the closing of your project, but months or years after. So you're coming back to it. It's not focused on the medium outcomes, but more very long-term of the project, impacts of the project. And it kind of speaks more to like the sustainability of your project, right? So sustainability, sorry, this is like a side tangent, but I just thought about this. So sustainability doesn't necessarily mean, are you going to get funding again to continue doing the same thing? Because sustainability can also mean are there rippling effects of the project, right? Are people still doing the things that you taught them? So ex post evaluation is a technique that will help you to determine if that is actually happening. And my last slide for this talk is, why is evaluation or M&E important? Any questions so far? Everything is clear? Crystal?
I don't want to know, but.
No.
When you're done with this, I have a few that I think based on some of the things we discussed among the group would be helpful.
Yeah.
But I think after you do this.
After this slide.
This may answer some of those things.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So we touched on this a little bit about the purpose during, when I introduced the purpose. So why is it important? It's a tool that measures your program's effectiveness. It's also a tool that helps you to determine if you're doing what you said you would do efficiently. M&E fosters public as well as political cooperation and supports information needs for your target audience. And M&E provides managers with timely information on the progress of your project activities, which allow them to compare what is planned to what is actually happening. So we think of that formative evaluation, we think of that midterm, real time. And M&E promotes organizational learning and encourages adaptive management. So we don't want to just do projects just to do them and just do them the same way all the time. We want to take a breath, take a stop and say, what went well in this? What didn't go well in this? How can I improve? And how can I either improve the next iteration of this project, or how can I just completely switch gears and try another technique or another type of activity to, again, achieve the same goal that I want. So that's that. Any questions?
So folks, that includes you all.
Where is the mic? Okay, good.
It's there.
Okay. Any?
So one of the things that came up in, I forget which session, regardless of the size of nonprofits, typically smaller organizations, but it could be at any size if there is, even within a big organization, a small team working on a bigger project. Finding the balance between execution and then these sorts of really, really important parts of project management is sometimes a challenge.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you had any general advice when we're approaching projects on how to make sure that, I don't know if it comes in with the framework, but how to make sure that we are positioning ourselves, I guess, to be able to give this the attention that it needs on the front end. Because I've been in, as a project manager, situations where I realized I'm not even prepared to do proper monitoring and evaluation. I'm already out there like busy.
Yeah.
booked, And I have no time to really,
Focus on this.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think there needs to be a change in mindset and a change in culture from the get-go, right? Because I do think the way that you even described it is as if it's something separate and apart, but it's not. Once you started thinking about an activity or a project or a program, this should already be baked in, because we'll go into it an M&E plan and how this falls into the project design. M&E happens, or the M&E plan, the logical framework, the frameworks that you will use happens during the project design bit. So if you know that you are doing, I don't know, training, like that's your thing. You should already be thinking about who is my audience, what's my goal at the end of this, and how do I know if I actually achieved that goal? So you're doing this capacity building exercise. Did you guys think about what your goal was? You know, if 2 people came in, you know, would that have been success? So if you think about M&E in that way, it's basically telling you, did you meet your benchmark? And you can design very easy tools to capture the data that you need. I hope that helped.
no, absolutely.
Can I add something?
Amanda.
Sure.
I think a few things as Andrika was talking that I wanted to add, and thanks for asking that question, is, in my opinion, with M&E, you have to be very intentional, right? So the same way that you know that our goal is to teach young Bahamian students in government schools who might not have access to swimming lessons, how to swim, right? We know that that's what we're going to do. We know we need kickboards. We know we need access to a pool or maybe the beach. I'm not sure where you conduct your lessons. We know we need this amount of dollars to put on this program. You're also being very intentional with, as Andrika said, we want to know if we're achieving our goal, and we're going to be very intentional with how we're going to set out doing that. And something that I have to say, a former colleague of mine who is an M&E specialist as well, she would always say this to us: M&E is everybody's business. So we have a tendency to think that M&E is for somebody else to do, or it's an add-on, as Andrika said, but actually everybody should be doing some form of monitoring, understanding how monitoring works, because that's going to inform all of the decisions that you make, how you conduct your work. And so you're not in a position where you're like, oh man, I'm trying to build this plane as I'm flying it, because I did not stop to think about how I'm going to measure my success. And I'm already like, I'm so deep in the field. And I know I've worked in the field. I know what it's like to be so deep doing your work that you're like, you want me to do a survey? Like, how, when am I going to get this done? Right. But if you factor that in and you have that plan from the beginning, it becomes part of your work. So it's not like, oh, this is an extra thing I need to do. It's as you go through your checklist of what you're doing to accomplish your goals or your tasks, some form of monitoring is also on them. And we're going to get into structures, as Andrika said, and how that can become a bit more intuitive too.
Yeah, so it really doesn't have to be hard. Of M&E, a monitoring tool here could have been your sign-in sheet. So we know how many people, a pre-test. So we know where you started and where you ended. And so we're able to measure that. And those are just 2 things. And like I said, we'll go through an M&E plan. We'll go through how you track these kinds of things, or what tools you can use to track these kinds of things. And it can be very easy. I don't know if your organizations do things like activity reports. I know I used to work at the Red Cross with Amanda. And we had to do activity reports every time we close out an activity. That's a monitoring tool, you know? So it doesn't have to be like this very big, complex, complicated thing. I'm very certain that you guys are already doing monitoring. Again, evaluation is another beast, but I think if we get the monitoring bit down right, you'll have the data to do your evaluations. And then a quick caveat, because evaluation is a beast, we will really, like I said, be focusing more on the monitoring. How do you actually get this data that you need to then inform your decision making? Okay, do we need a stretch break? Do we need a bathroom break? Do we need a water break? No? All right. No, yes, no. Okay. So let's talk about frameworks. So an important step in monitoring evaluation is the development of a framework, because the framework lays the foundation of the M&E plan. And so there are many kinds of frameworks, there are many kinds of schematics. I know I keep saying that in monitoring evaluation, but it's an evolving field. But the framework that we're going to look at, or we're going to dive a bit deeper into, is a logical framework. And the premises is it's logical. It's step by step. It's a step by step kind of process. And so the schematic or the diagram that kind of goes with the logical framework would be something like a theory of change that people may hear of, or a logic model, sometimes called result chain, or a more robust matrix called a log frame matrix. I'm partial to a log frame matrix, so we're not really going to talk about a theory of change. I think that is I think it's kind of like an abstract kind of framework or model. So we're going to do I like to think logically and very succinctly. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So logical frameworks summarize what the project intends to do and how, and the key assumptions made and outputs that will be monitored and then eventually evaluated. A logical or a log frame or a logical framework matrix is a standardized table that summarizes the important aspects of the project. So if you look at the slide, we're talking about the purpose, like what is the purpose of a logical framework? Again, it summarizes what you want to do. It summarizes your assumptions. It summarizes your outputs, your outcomes. It describes how your program elements will actually work together and what things you should prioritize, M&E priorities. It's kind of a blueprint of your program. It identifies the kind of questions you should be asking yourselves as you develop your program or your project. It illustrates the point at which M&E activities should actually happen or be conducted. And then it demonstrates when long-term outcomes should be expected. And so the benefits of laying out your program like this is like it's a very it's a quick snapshot of what you hope to achieve, how you're going to do it, even the type of data tools that you're going to use, means of verification is what we call them. Yeah, it's a very easy, like a quick snapshot. I guess that's the best way to describe it. And it helps you to answer key questions like, are our resources adequate? Are we actually carrying out these activities? How successful are we at carrying out these activities? It's a useful tool to identify and illustrate the operational factors important to achieving a successful ultimate outcome. So this is basically what a logic model or result chain looks like. It doesn't have to look exactly like this, but it will have these components. It will always have an input, always have activities, outputs, immediate outcomes, long-term, mid-term, short-term impacts, and of course, your impact, your goal. And so a logic model, it presents a very straightforward view of your project design. It doesn't really account for things that affect your project, like risks or assumptions. Sometimes they include that, but most times they don't. It's very narrow focused. And so this narrow focus assists program managers and M&E planners as they clarify and the direction or the relationship among elements of their interests. So let's go into those key definitions of those key components. So inputs. Inputs are your resources, things like the financial, human, material resources, anything that is needed to implement an activity. Sometimes it's referred to as the 3 or the 5 M's. So money, manpower, methodologies, materials, and moments. Moments mean time. And those elements kind of constitutes inputs. Any resources that you can think of. Budget allocations is also a very big resource for us, right? And so can anyone tell me what they think an input is for this training? What do you think went into actually conducting this training? Research? Who would do the research? All right, so human resources, right? Like me, a personnel, a person. Anything else? Space, that's a good one. Yeah. So there are many elements that we need to put together. Like there was money, there's the equipment that we're gonna use, there's time. All of these things are inputs. Anything, like I said, all the resources needed to actually carry out your activity. And so an important part of M&E is deciding what and how much to measure. And yeah, how do we measure? How do we measure and what we measure? The next step or process in the logic model is our activities. So we got all our inputs, we know we got our money, we got our resources, we got everything that we have. Now we're going to carry out activities, and activities are actions taken or the work performed through which inputs such as funds and technical assistance give rise to or mobilize. So things like you're going to host a water and sanitation training, you're going to host a food drive, you're going to, do these kind of, I think we're very good at determining what the activity is that our projects and programs will do. And so our role again is to determine, as M&E people, to determine how much and what we're going to measure. Outputs are the direct products or deliverables from the activities that we just did. So I'm going to host a training. What is my output? Like, people are trained. I'm going to host a food drive. What's my output? My food was distributed. So it's exactly, outputs are what you get out. What are the put outs from your activities? Yeah, outputs are immediate results of the activity, and they're typically easy to measure. Can someone give me an example in their own project of what they think about your activities? What would be an output of your activity? Not you, Stefan, because I gave you yours just now.
We're having a summer camp in July, so I would say an output would be the summer camp exhibition, which will be the students' work. That kind of thing, that's a big hoorah, right? You've been working for 2 weeks, now you get to have an exhibition.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And for the project we have in Haiti, we start using this school, we built a few classrooms, and the classrooms have been used for community activities in the area, because there is nothing where we are using this school. The school building is also being used for community-led projects. So it's good to see other people are asking to use for certain, so that will be one of the outputs like that.
So your output, your activity is you're building a school or you're building a building.
Yeah.
So your output would be
access to education to the kids, and then we start using the school. So of course, one of the output is that children are going to school. But in terms of since it is a project that is also helping the community, so the community is using or building for community-led activities. So I will see that as kind of
yeah. Okay.
So you might frame that as number of external community organizations who use your center, right? So that's an output as well, is that it's not just his program using it. And you would define this, you would choose if you want to track this. Exactly. Are there other organizations who are using this space? And if so, how many are there? Yeah. How many children are now attending classes?
Yeah.
And for yours as well, you could also add how many students here. Right, that's what helps. That is a very clear and tangible, measurable thing that you can very easily track.
So just, so for example, something like that, I'm wondering, like,
there may be times where originally you would have had like, I'm building this up and the intention is for students. Then incidentally, along the way,
Yeah,
then you
incidentally,
realize,
yeah.
right, this is also a side effect, yeah, that's now become an outcome, but it wasn't originally in the plan. So is there like particular methods of like, obviously that's part of monitoring and evaluation, of like capturing it, but if it wasn't previously existing in like the logic model, like, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, is there kind of like, what's the best thing to kind of do, like, right, obviously you record it somewhere, but if there's like techniques that you could recommend.
Yeah, so logic models and log frames are not static. They are living documents, so things can be added or taken away if needed. Yeah, Amanda, you have anything to add?
You thought, so when I want to correct you, you called it an outcome, so it's an output.
Output,
So,
sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
so no, and so this is actually a very important part of the conversation, is that when you're first, I'm like, behind the pillar.
The camera's trying to follow you.
Sorry, camera, I'm sorry.
Not me,
It was fine.
her.
So that's a very important part of the conversation. I think when I first started doing monitoring evaluation, you can get tripped up. What's output, what's an outcome? So don't apologize. That's all part of learning. We will work through that. I think like Angelica said, the point of putting in frameworks and plans is to almost be prepared for those moments as well. So knowing how to capture that kind of additional information. So it would really depend on the purpose of the program, right? So this might just be a pleasant unintended consequence, right?
Yeah, actually, it was intended because a part of the project is to use an educational facility in the rural area as a development hub for the community. So we are doing school, but at the same time, we are being present in the life of the community. It's like a community development. Using education, and educational facilities as a development hub. But that issue of unintended output is also an interesting topic that we delve into.
It's very interesting. So there are a few ways you might want to tackle it, and we can talk about it in detail as well. But instinctively, I would say you would capture that in a forbidden report somewhere, right? So you might be doing monthly reports or quarterly reports, and you might have a section that says unintended outcomes, or not outcomes, unintended occurrences. So I'm trying to stay away from those technical terms, right, for right now. Because you might just want to say that it is a happy new development. We did not plan for this, right? You built a school or community facility, and we found out that other groups started to use this. And then it's up to, like I said, your original end goal, whether it's important enough to continue to report out on it or track it. Maybe it just happens once, or maybe as you are meeting with your team and starting to think about the impact that this community center is having, you're like, we didn't actually consider that other groups would want to use this, and having a really positive spin-off effect in the community. So is there space for us to talk to the donor about maybe looking at incorporating that a bit more into our work, right? So that's the thing, it's all, your projects aren't so fixed that there isn't room to kind of accommodate, track, report out on things like this that might come up.
Yeah, it might be thinking like that, like that's a potentially, depending on the context and situation, where like broader learning would happen.
Yeah.
And so like we kind of wanting to denote that and think about, oh, what does this impact this project, general, the other projects, other things, and just general learning. Thank you.
And I love that you're thinking like that, because so much of M&E is that analytical kind of like, let's make the connections to the bigger picture and how this feeds into different work. So that's wonderful.
Could I chip in just a little bit? Like with the real world example, I wonder if I should, it's going to be talking. Or this here, but with this very project, actually, I think because we have a lot of these frameworks in place, it did strengthen our ability to adapt and really determine the additional things that we would be able to do. So with the marketing part of just telling organizations about this, we know that in the nonprofit space in the Bahamas, context-wise, people are very busy. People are out there literally saving lives, literally feeding people, literally giving kids skills that they need to live in a country right climate change. So we knew that we would have to tackle it bit by bit. But interestingly, what happened since we started is we had a recent engagement, I think just this past weekend or the one before, with the Ministry of Youth and their cohort of youth organizations. We got interest from, I think, Jeff, the Global Environment Facility. They have a project where they want to train environmental organizations. So those doors kind of open. And then one or two individual nonprofit organizations and groupings that sort of already existed reached out. And the way that we approached it has been a little different from place to place. Based on funding, maybe with Ministry of Youth, it's like, oh, we're like, okay, we got you. But it was pretty easy because we had the framework in place to decide like what scope can we actually additionally take on outside of what we were already planned. So we could do maybe once, like a one full day with your groups, and then we'll lead them to come into our session, for example. That's not what happened. And then other groups, because they were on projects, they had funding, so we already knew with X amount of funds, we're able to sort of facilitate this amount of training or opportunities or travel to meet you. So one of the groups were on Exuma, for example. So I could easily see, and I've been definitely a part of projects where when the M&E sort of frameworks aren't in place, it's actually a lot more difficult to make operational decisions based on what you could actually realistically take on. And then it pushes you further in that space of, I'm really busy and I do not have time to report on anything. So I think that's a pretty helpful comment, and it does come up, and we're more poised to rise to the occasion when we have our frameworks in place.
Well said. So if it moves from unexpected to expected, then yes, you want to incorporate it into your.
I can just share that, like, with us, the output has always been like to teach children to swim. Right? We have been keeping that for 15 years, and we can monitor our data. And we're just getting back to it to break the COVID, because we're really getting ready to make a drive to improve the data, but now we're back to that. And a new part that we are going, it's going to be interesting to see how it develops is we've got the MOU with the Defense Force, we have coaches. And the purpose of that was to have reliable coaches, you know, and everything compared to your volunteers all the time. And so it is going to see, the purpose of it was to have reliable coaches, and they're already employed, so the stipend they get, they're not relying to live on it, you know, quote unquote. So that was our purpose. But then the other, like a thing that we want to see in time is their community involvement and their role modeling with the children. Are we going to see results of that? And a negative that we don't want to see, which we would see with the other coaches, would be, I didn't want to teach swimming now, I'm going to go start my swim program. So, but I don't think we should not have that problem with them, because they are already employed in a, I would say, a very stable job, and that they like, that they chose. So that should not be a problem there. But well, already one thing that we have seen with them, with the 1 month that we did our training, is they have become role models not only to the children, but to our university students that have been helping. And university students weren't taking too much initiative. You know, like they were a bit afraid, I don't know, or, you know, and I mean, they were good, but they weren't taking it. But so they were supposed to be teaching the Defense Force guy from the coach, but it ended up the Defense Force guy, because they're so used to being like taking charge, getting in there, and even though they didn't know what they were necessarily doing, they would do it, you know what I mean? And so they gave actually the university students more confidence, and we saw the improvement in them in the 1 month. That was just amazing, you know what I mean? So it was really an output that we, you know, we're watching to see what happens. So I think next year, I would say the students being taught is, we've already established that, but
Yeah.
for 15 years, we got that down pat, but just seeing how this development of the coaches, you know, on our next level.
So I think that's a very good, sorry.
I don't know, I was just-
Oh,
Yeah, I'm monitoring, you know, the impact of having positive male role models with those children, and that's quite a challenge, I would say.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So how to monitor that then?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, it's a really good segue into the outcomes, because I think we started speaking more about behavioral changes, which is what the outcomes kind of speak to, right? It's if outputs are direct product of activities, they're easy to measure, like how many people came, how many people didn't. It's usually just counting. Outcomes, the key word to an outcome is change. So outcomes are associated with behavioral changes or attitude changes. And it does require more advanced methods in how to measure. It's not just simply counting. And so it can be immediate, but it can also be seen after some time. So that's why outcomes are considered short-term, long-term, medium-term, long-term. So it is a result of your program, but it does focus more on the change of knowledge, change of behavior, change of attitudes. Hi.
So I guess just thinking about, Mayor Stefan said, developing a poise to be prepared to changes, the answer to that, even if it's a small question.
Mhm.
When I think about outcomes that, I think about some of the outcomes of our program, particularly in-route housing education.
Mhm.
And I feel like when we sit down and we look at that program on a regular basis, and we think about what we want our, what are we doing, how are we gonna do it?
Mhm.
How are we gonna make it happen with every single item, so radically different. And who do we wanna reach, how we're gonna reach them, what our outcomes are gonna be, what our outcomes are gonna be. I feel like one of our outcomes that we actually don't think that we've not quite had, but I feel like it's a huge part of how I find myself. I found myself in the position several times to actually have to defend the program.
Mm.
And one of those outcomes that we have to don't want is how we have learned to communicate.
Okay.
With our stakeholders on the island. Because you can't send an email, or you may have to, you could send an email, or you may need a call, or you may need to WhatsApp, or you know what, none of that works, and somebody needs to jump on a plane and actually.
Right. Yep.
And I was just thinking, so that has been, I feel like a huge part of one outcome of that program in particular, and I mean, also as we try to broaden our reach throughout the country, it really has become how do we communicate?
Yeah.
With the different stakeholders on the island, and I found myself in position one day with the board member actually, I had to do a presentation to the board,
Mhm.
and their question, isn't it, it's expensive program? So the question was, well, how do we reduce costs?
Mhm.
Can't we just do it this way on this side? And because we've actually been, maybe not as specific as we should, but over the past, I don't know, 6 years. 5 years, we've actually been really keeping a close eye on how we interact with people on the island.
Mhm.
I was able to say, we're
Doesn't work.
going to, would you suggest this topic? And then it's what?
Nice.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's important to remember that this is it's a logical process, right? So we want to link every bit to each other, right? So that may be so if your project had included something like organizational development or something along those lines, then we could consider that in your log frame or in your logic model as an outcome. But what we're speaking more towards, and definitely we would capture that in reporting as unintended,
Right.
you know, consequences or unintended impacts. But yeah, so we're speaking about like the logical process of the things that you have planned to capture in this framework. those kinds of unintended things can be captured outside, it can be captured using other monitoring tools. But I think that's great. I know in the Red Cross, we had a bit about organizational development, like, yes, we're doing all of these things that impact our community, but there was also like, what is the staff gaining? What, how are we improving? So I think that's great. Amanda, any thoughts? No, sorry, twin brain.
Right.
Yeah.
We have a communication plan. We have to revisit that communication plan. For several reasons. A huge part of that, of course, is financial. Something that I keep on finding, having with my colleagues, that there is going to be an understanding, and not all my colleagues, some of them I work with. But I think of the understanding that communication is something that you actually talk about.
Yeah.
That has been, to me, one of the outcomes that we just we kind of do put in place where you partly your soft information back that these are improvements in the using itself. There's a lot of things with the update of time and then under the overall pattern umbrella and we say that okay, based on this when you were evaluating our program, you had to kind of improvement and then communication to the board. We actually
So your output would be your communication plan, right? But your outcome would be your staff gain confidence or in communicating with blah, 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 because it's about the personal change within you, not necessarily like the tangible document. Yeah. Yeah. You develop strategies. Yeah.
Well, this one's not working, that's not working.
Yep.
What's next?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do we infiltrate a remote community?
Family. Right.
I made this back and I took the documentary so anyone coming after you were to pick it up and go, oh, you don't have to go to Android.
Yeah, and that is like the beauty of M&E, right? Like you want to set up these frameworks, you want to lay out your plan succinctly and clearly, concisely, so that if there's somebody that's coming in after you knows exactly what's the game plan, what are we actually aiming to achieve, and how are we planning to do that. And I think I said before, it's a living document. So you shouldn't just develop your logic model and say, okay, we developed this. You have to keep going back, just like the communication plan. You have to keep going back, making changes, iterations to it. Yeah. I think this was great discussion. And the last component of our logic model is impact. And, that's what we're all aiming to achieve. It's the long-term results of one or more programs over time. And there's an example of an HIV project, so such as HIV infections, morbidity, mortality. It's the lofty goal of your project. It's very general statements. And so impact is more on a population level rather than like a community level. It's speaking to things such as incidence or prevalence rates. And we want to measure the role of our program or the impact or the change that our program is making.
Can I just add for impact? Usually with impact, and then you think that it's related to that like pie in the sky, lofty goal. And what's important for us to all remember is that usually no one program, project, organization will be solely contributing to that goal. Okay, so for example, in this example, like we're talking about HIV infection, so maybe there is when we were with the Bahamas Red Cross, we had a pair education program. We would distribute condoms, we would teach young people about safer sex, right? If we were to then fund an evaluation that said, HIV infection rates decreased in the Bahamas, we would not have been able to say that was all us. Okay, because there was Ministry of Health who was doing testing and doing work. There were other organizations who were all contributing to the same goal. Now that goal might not be the same for all of us, right? But we're all feeding into that. And so it's often very difficult to say with certainty, my project successfully met this goal. Usually the way we talk about it is, did you contribute to it? Okay, so were your activities contributing to the accomplishment of a goal? So just something to keep in mind, because, you know, we want to make sure that as we're working through this, we're aware of kind of limitations. So when we think big impact, we think pie in the sky, we think goal, we're thinking, how are we contributing to that, not how are we solely responsible for it.
Yeah, good point, Amanda. Thank you. So how do we read a logic model? So we read it in an if-then frame. So if I have the resources, then I can do the activities. If I do the activities, then I will complete the outputs. If I complete the outputs, then I will achieve my outcomes. If I achieve my outcomes, then I will contribute to the impact that I intend. And so that's why it's considered a logic model. There is a step-by-step process. And every activity, not necessarily the resources, but every activity should have an output. Every output should contribute to an outcome that will ultimately, you know, even if it's a block, will contribute to the impact. So you shouldn't have something like, I'm hosting this training, the people are trained, but that doesn't lead to any outcome. There's no reason, then what would be the reason of you doing that? It would just be like this one ad hoc thing that doesn't contribute to your goal. And so again, like I said, the process, the whole purpose or the benefits of monitoring evaluation is for you to determine, are you using your resources wisely? So if I do this random ad hoc training that doesn't contribute to my goal, I'm wasting resources. I'm wasting, you know, people's time, you know, and not to say that you can't do it, but I mean, we're limited in funds sometimes, right? As NGOs. And so you want to maximize all the resources you have. So that's how you're going to read the logic model. And we're going to go into the log frame matrix, and it's the same kind of thought process. If I do this, then this. If I do this, then this. So this is an example of a logical framework matrix. I wonder if we can move this screen thing.
Let's see.
I didn't realize that was.
It didn't block most of it.
I mean, it doesn't really matter. We're not going to really go into that much, but I'm just curious.
There's a way, I just never remember.
How to do it. The actual slide.
Yeah.
No.
That's okay. That's
Okay.
yeah. That's fine. So
Is it better at the bottom for now? or-
yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So oh, we have chats. What are they saying in the chat?
I'm just asking for the slides and then you.
Oh, okay. So just like the logic model, this is it's a more robust version of that. So, and the way that it's framed, it's usually framed in kind of like a matrix or a table. So we have our activities and our outputs, we know that. This logical framework is saying, a log frame is saying purpose, but we, you know, some terms are kind of interchangeable. So a term that's interchangeable can be outcomes and sometimes called objectives. We won't really go into that, but you know, I know that you probably have heard outcome or objective. Oh no, I can't move the slide. Okay. So again, what's the definition? So the components of a log frame, and we won't go through all of them because we just did it with the logic model, because the logic model, like I said, is the Stephanie. The logic model is a more simplified version of the log frame matrix. So a log frame matrix.
Trying to come out.
It captures our problem statement. So what are we trying to actually attack? What is the problem that we see that we want our program to address? What's the goal? And that's the impact. What's the ultimate goal of our project? Again, it's high level, it's long term. What's the objective? And specific objectives, the project or your program is aiming to achieve. Inputs we know are resources, activities we know are actions, outputs we know are the results or the deliverables of activities, and outcomes are behavioral changes, attitude changes that happen over time. And they do not necessarily have to be immediate. So impact, same as the goal. It's that long-term result that happens because the activities have happened. Indicators are, I'm going to call them measurement statements. It's how we're actually measuring our results. They give the sense of what has been achieved or what is to be achieved. Means of verification are those data or information points that verifies that we have the data. So a means of verification could be something like a report or a sign-in sheet. That's how we're verifying the data that we have. And risks or assumptions are external factors that affect the progress of the report of the project or the program. So while a logic model, it just speaks to like the bare bones, what we're doing, how we're doing, what we want to do, what's the impact. Log frames capture much more. They capture what and how we will measure this thing. What's the document that we're going to use to verify it? What's our assumption about, or the risks that will affect our project or program. This is another example of a log frame, and this is just to show how you read it. So while a logic model is if then, a logical framework or a log frame is if and. So if I have this and my assumption is correct and I don't have these risks, then I will achieve this. So this example says run 5 summer reading camps, each with the capacity for 100 grades, 100 grade 5, grade 6 students. So if I have that and the parents of the children, we have parents of children with low reading proficiencies, then I will achieve this output of the completed reading cap, right? Does that make sense? Okay. I feel like I explained that a bit wonky. Yeah.
I don't know if you were going on any more about risks and assumptions, but if I could, I think that's definitely one of the points of challenge for a lot of organizations for several reasons. So available data, previous experience, those things sort of impact our ability to realistically and logically think about what those risks are. So I don't know if I don't know how I'm trying to frame this question, but in terms of our approach to really taking the time out to look at risks and assumptions, I don't know if there's any general guidance on how to approach that process.
Yeah.
Because I think that I've definitely worked with several organizations where you're passionate, so you have these lofty goals and ideas of what you want to do. And for example, I had done a lot of family island engagement on my previous job, and coming here, I'm like, okay, we can definitely make the message of the governance and citizen participation attractive, but we're not going to draw a crowd until we put in the work to do that. So in that instance, it was dependent on maybe the expertise of a particular staff member.
Yeah.
But there are many organizations that are struggling with the process of really thinking about what the risks are.
And and your assumptions.
Yeah.
Because they are two different things, right? An assumption is like, oh, people will show up to your training.
Right.
And a risk may be there's a hurricane and no one's coming to the training. There's flooding, so people can't come to the training. And so that affects the rollout of what you're implementing. Another one, for example, things like Nancy. An assumption is that these Defense Force people will be trained. A risk could be they take your program, you know? So But it is important to think about those things because think about the things that will affect or what needs to be in place for your program to actually be rolled out or implemented. So that's what an assumption is. We assume that we're going to have all of these favorable factors so that we will be able to do it. And a risk can be anything that can harbor that, like it can stop that or halt that.
I think, if I may add, when you, and we're gonna do an activity, but when you're building out these kind of frameworks, I think once you get to the point of listing your risks and assumptions, it can feel kind of trivial, but it's not actually. And let me give you a very real example. After Hurricane Dorian hit, who would have predicted that we would have had a global pandemic happen how many months afterwards? And I was with the American Red Cross, which was supporting recovery efforts with report in Africa. And the impact, obviously, we all have our COVID stories, right? But the impact that COVID had on everything we had planned to do was so tremendous that we had to spend, I'm sure we all had to go through it. We had to spend so much time being like, you know, we did not anticipate that a pandemic was going to happen and it would have impacted our ability to reach out to people to get them to sign up for our programs or whatever the incidents are, right? So I think once you've had one or two experiences like that, then your brain starts to think like, okay, I can't operate in a place where I assume that everything is going to go right. And so writing down the list and my assumptions are really critical. And it's really critical because if something goes off, so this example, we had rain the last 2 nights, right? Very, very heavy rain. Roads have been flooded. So what if the roads out here were flooded this morning? We weren't able to host this training. And you had to justify to your donor why this training didn't happen. You would be able to reference a risk was that it would be bad weather, it's hurricane season, and that participants would not be able to physically come to the space to participate in the training, right? So it helps to justify why something may not have happened the way that you would initially kind of outline for it to happen, right? It helps to add to your credibility, and it also really helps you with contingency planning. You're able to think like, okay, can I pivot to everybody being on Zoom? Is that effective? Will that work? Can I pivot to next week? You know, so risks and assumptions might feel like they're the least important part of this document. And I say that because when I first started using them, I was like,
Yeah.
but actually they're quite important and they're very useful. So.
If I could say one more. I
Yeah,
think, particularly for organizations that are working on the islands, one of the things that I have learned too in terms of risks is even the perception of your organization and the community.
Yeah.
So I don't wanna put too much of the specifics of something that happened, but Chris and I were talking about a few instances where maybe a board member would make a statement in the public, for example, in a completely different capacity. And this has happened to me in most organizations that I work for, whether positive or negative. But I do remember in one of my previous roles, I was visiting an island and I didn't know that someone in leadership of the organization had made a public statement that wasn't intended to offend the people on that island, but it did. And man, oh man, they were not happy to see me. And so similarly, you're posting, you know, an activity, a training, and it's like, this is what I do every day.
Yeah.
I'm a good person, don't be mad at me. But as simple as it sounded, it became a thing that had to be overcome in order to actually see success in the project.
Yeah.
So I've definitely learned that, you know, when you're doing any sort of community outreach projects, the perception of the public of your organization, how you manage that maybe through your communications plan.
Yeah. It's very important.
Oh man, yeah.
It can affect in everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we probably all operate from a space of an assumption that whoever we're doing our work with will love us and will like welcome us with open arms, right? We are teaching children how to be artists, or to build their artistic capacities. Of course, who wouldn't want the kids to do that, right? We come with that assumption, but there may be somebody whose kid went to your art camp 5 years ago and they had a poor experience, and now they've told other people around it, and so that word of mouth is spread, you know. So I'm not saying that's what happened. But it could happen. We think we're teaching young people how to swim. Of course, everybody is gonna want to learn how to swim. We live on an island, and I've heard people say, "I don't swim to work. I drive to work. Why should I learn how to swim? Why should my child know how to swim?" You know, so we assume that people, that we have the best intentions. We want to go in and we want to do good. Everybody will love what we do. But you might have to build that relationship or repair your reputation through something that happened.
Yeah. I would also add something, know where you are going. So I will say, I mean, I mean, everybody's own versus the ad, but everything on that is so probably different.
Yeah.
And I was thinking in particular, one time we went out to Andrews. And we understand that area, like from north to south central, like there is some separation. Andrews takes that role. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we could barely get people from the settlement adjacent to the one where the program is happening to come. It is very attitude like about, I didn't have it yet.
Yeah. That's, we know very well.
That anywhere else. Because really, even with us saying we're fine busing. Right, we like we will transport you, we will like do all these things. They're not gonna.
You from Andressy.
No. In terms of this assumption, like, we had been to enough out by that, and we thought like, oh, you know, we have like an idea what some of the challenges are, and we're working to address them, but that was not one that we expected.
Mm-hmm.
So you had the assumption that your experience in other family islands prepared you for Andrew.
Yeah.
And people found out that.
No.
No, it was not an issue of transportation, it was not an issue of access, it was an issue of mindset. We are not going to leave our community down to those other people's community for the program. It does not matter that it's only and
That's north. That's north, and that's south.
Yeah.
So.
no, North and South Long Island don't have nothing on Andrew.
Like honestly, my family is from Ireland, and
Yep.
two separate settlements, I would have to go to each one, no one's gonna come. No.
Interesting.
No. At least in North and South Long Island, if you can find a way to get to the middle, people will come. If
Yeah.
We're so kind of
But
20 minutes. 20 minutes.
We didn't check it. So let's see, because they're talking about data that they would go from High Rock.
We're right on time.
Okay, cool, just make it.
Yeah. We're right on time now.
Cool.
So anyway, so I just want to.
This sound like a lunch conversation. Let's talk about the differences between the islands. So go on.
What was the end result?
Great question.
Legend has it, we're still not getting on.
So is that we realize that we have to.
How many?
Rethink our retirement.
But I will say it did help to review that, so that we had a long time, we went there after, and we were like, okay, we don't know, I think some stuff is going on. And I'm trying to look into the public, looking into the one private business, and it should be a public domain, so it's associated with someone else. So it did help in how we, approach that thing.
I wouldn't say you put public building was, anyway, we get to that.
All right. Let's move forward.
About that, I think, it helped in that way that what
going back and we need to. This is very helpful.
Hey, good. So my bad, I didn't ask the question. Does anyone have experience with logic models or logical frameworks prior to this training? I have a I had a feeling, yeah, which is by the way you were talking, I was like, she knows some stuff. A little bit
Not in constructing them, but just working
in,
within them and.
okay,
Doing part of the actual data compilation. So like,
that's good. That's good. So you have some engagement, because what we are gonna do is kind of build a very simple log frame. We're not gonna go into indicators because that takes more time than we have. But we will go into, let me just pull up the template so you can see. And I feel bad for our, what we call our Zoomies. Just say yes. Skip. Okay, so basically we're gonna split up in groups. I think we have 12 people. I did not count you, Steph, that's okay. So we'll split up in 2 groups of 6. And basically, we're gonna walk through as a group. We want you to attempt to build out just one logic model within this logical framework. So for example, you're going to put in, I guess it's easy that we just split it up for 2, right? So one.
How many years?
Can you do breakout rooms with them, Steph?
Well, there's 6 people, there are 6 folks on Zoom.
Yeah, we could let them all work through this.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so in this, can I send the link in the Zoom chat?
You can, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that's the activity link. The example.
Yeah.
The example or this one? Yeah. Okay. So as a group, like I said, we're gonna just try to fill out this table. So our program is Screen Free Bahamas, and our problem is
Sorry, I just lived in San Enrique and I made. This is
Yes.
not a real program that we are trying to.
Although I do think it was enforced by personal, okay. Growing dependency on screen time for children, stimulation and enjoyment has led to an observed increase in the incidence of maladjusted behavior in Bahamian children under 5 years old. So that's the problem that we see happening. And so our program, Screen Free Bahamas, our goal is to contribute, because like we said, it's lofty, right? We want to contribute to the positive behavioral and educational development of Bahamian children under 5 years of age, right? And so, we've been talking about what we're going to do, and we think let's host a couple trainings, right? So that's our first activity. And the second is we want to do a toy drive. Let's give them Montessori toys. Let's give them toys like the birds, so that they are not going to be on their screens the whole time. So your job as our M&E experts or M&E officers in our program is to build out our logical framework. So our goal, the activities that we're going to do. So you're going to put in what you think may be some inputs, and you only have to do like 1 or 2. It doesn't have to be very, just so that you get a feel of how to think through it logically, right? So what are the inputs that will achieve? You can do one, you can say host the training, or you can do the toy drive. What are the outputs of that? The activity that you choose, and what is the outcome? Remember, outcome is behavioral changes, attitude changes, some type of change that you want to see someone do, right? And then we're going to skip indicators, and we're going to go straight into means of verification. And like I said, means of verification is that tangible document, the thing that we can go back to, like the report, the activity report, or the sign-in sheets, those kinds of things, like the actual documents that you can say, oh yeah, this happened, or oh yeah, this is where this data can be found. And then you're going to do risks and assumptions. So a risk and assumption for your input. Assumption, you have the money. A risk, you don't have the money. So something very simple like that, and you only have to take one activity and kind of flesh it out, and talk it through. So we're gonna do that for about 20 minutes, 20 minutes, and then we'll come back as a group and you will tell us your logical thoughts. Does that sound easy enough? Does it sound doable? Do you have any questions before we break you up into groups? Yeah, you can do a water break. That's completely fine. Like we said, informal, move around, take a stretch, go to the bathroom, come back.
Mr. Mills, before you have your water break, I know you're like, I was so close to it. Let's just assign the group so that when you come back, you can get right.
I think it's two, maybe we just split like this, right? 2, 4. Let's keep swim together. Yes, let's swim. And let's keep. Together.
Yeah. You guys. Yes, please. And please, Chris. You're gonna stay where you're at. Right? Sorry, you're gonna go. Yeah, you guys are gonna merge.
On Zoom, we've given you the, I don't know where to look. We've given you the template.
Oh.
Oh, so we've given you the template that you guys can fill out as a group. You're gonna put them in a breakout room, or I guess they can just stay where they're at.
Yeah.
So I guess it makes sense to assign a scribe, and you guys can talk it through. Yep. If any questions, please feel free to put in the chat.
And we will both be floating.
I want to
Okay. That was my.
Okay, Zoom.
And you can.
Well, not everyone can remember. Quick announcement that I did not make at the beginning. The kettle and the Keurig can't be plugged in at the same time, so if anyone wants to heat water, just unplug the Keurig. Yeah, okay.
Okay, Zoom squad. I don't know how many people have already clicked onto the link, because that's one person. So I see an anonymous panda, an anonymous chipmunk. One of those may be my computer. It does. But we can kind of, for those of you that are here, kind of talk through the activity. I don't know if someone wants to write, and I could kind of talk us through. And if there are any challenges hearing me, because there's a lot of discussion happening in the room, I could move over to the other side so y'all can just let me know. But we only need one person from Zoom to be our scribe who will actually write, and the rest of us could sort of go through the discussion. Is everyone here clear on the activity? I feel like, 1 second. I think I could actually stop sharing for a moment, because if you click the link, you'll be able to see the activity, and that'll probably help, because I cannot see everyone.
But then when they do the side.
I forgot to resume.
That's okay.
So sorry, y'all.
Okay, I want to go to, I think it was outputs. I think it was the one that they kind of, okay. So, we've completed our training, and our means of verification is very, very easy. We have an attendance register. We have the participant evaluation, which is, I think, what you were talking about with Claire, when you do a pre and post test to show knowledge change, but that's how we're going to validate that this actually happened and what were the results.
You can also get monitoring data from this, so qualitative and quantitative. And then just tell me quickly, what do you think is a risk or assumption in this line? What is a risk to the training being completed? Or an assumption?
One of the assumptions is that people will attend. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And then you won't have any uneventful disasters.
Yep.
And you can get funding.
All right, good, good. So we see, so do you understand your logic? We have your resources, we can host this training, we completed this training, and now everyone is aware of this problem. And the increased awareness will then contribute to our 5-year-olds having positive behavioral educational development. Yeah?
Makes sense.
Okay, and how we know that that has happened? We have attendance registers to prove that we did this training. We have the participant evaluation, and we assume that people will come, people will want to be engaged. And we also, and then a risk to that, or we assume that there won't be any natural disasters to hinder us from having this. So well done.
It's good. Yeah, I think your team did very well. Just something to consider, and a means of verification can also be photos.
Yep.
Right, so let's not put aside things like that as well. That is a means of verification. Stefan could take a picture of the room or a video, and that verifies that this training happened.
And I did.
That adds a lot of color to your reporting too, Chad. So kind of the, where's our communication for?
And then just something, I'm just playing a little devil's advocate. In terms of your participant evaluation, I would push us to think, and not that it has to be one or the other, but an evaluation, did you mean like a
pre and post test?
Not so much a pre and post test, did you mean like a, how was it? Like, what's your feedback? Because the pre and post test to me would more so show if they've built knowledge and awareness, right? Obviously, you're not going to take a pre and post test if you didn't actually attend the training. But I think that there's more strength in a participant evaluation of a pre and post test to prove your outcomes, right? Because you're trying to show an improvement in knowledge or behavior or attitude. For a participant evaluation, that would look at an immediate outcome. Like, was there knowledge transfer, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be one or the other, and you can actually put that up here as well, right? So your participant evaluation could be a means of verification at your outcome level.
This can also speak to beneficiary monitoring, right? So this participant evaluation could be the perception, right? As opposed to what knowledge I gained, how do I perceive this thing? So that, yeah. Good point, Amanda. Let's go to this lovely group, because you did the same thing, host training, right? Or no, you did host training. You did. Okay. Well done, Zumi. Thank you, thank you. Do you guys have a spokesperson?
Yes.
I think one of the things that we just discussed a little bit also is in terms of a resident when it comes to the parent actually want change.
Yeah.
They want
Yeah, I think that should work.
we also talked about an outcome potentially being parent support group in terms of, alternative activities like meeting up and doing other activities, what engagement they want in alternative.
So is that an outcome or is that an activity?
Well, I think about, we could keep both like that, because the outcome, so the outcome from this training is that the parents actually want to become a part of the support group that allows them to effectively implement what they've learned.
So the
Bring up the template.
Right, and increase parents, increase engagement in parents, because you have the language is very, right, there, you have to frame it as though it's.
When it types.
And continue behavior change, it's a change within the person. So
I'm such a Mac person.
Fine, alternative.
I don't know. Maybe I would, I'll just type it here.
I am more aware of the damage that the screen will have on my child. But that is a result of my activity, right? So the support group, I'm gonna establish a support group. I go to the support group. Then from the support group, I learn all the things and I will change things. So that's the kind of law. So the support group is the activity. I do the support group, it's the outfit, and then I'm going to there's the outfit. Okay, that's great. What would be my, let's play on the, what would be my need for identification? You could do the same. Okay, so share the fact photos and share photos, something else to discuss, and maybe, as facilitators, we need to. Okay. And I'm not leaving. We're gonna check it in this. And I can be here, and also kind of to come down. And we think, I'm gonna be in the second, and each would share what they've been doing with their child, and how they support together. So your needs verification would be a check-in report and like a checklist. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear the outcome.
The outcome was as as parent don't increase my learning, so I'll be a better parent for attending these support groups. They changed the activity. I will be more engaged. Yeah.
So one person is there, and the other person is not, but now we like compare them.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a very communication. Yeah.
And then you can share it with the classroom.
Yeah, yeah, so that's how you would disseminate. You can put that as a, yeah, that's the tangible document, but when we talk about, like the enemy plan and dissemination of our findings, that will play a role. So we're gonna dive a bit deeper into the way that we report our data and the way that we disseminate that.
Just because for this assignment, people want something.
Yeah.
And then.
Yeah.
Put out something and then.
Put out an Instagram post. Yeah.
Right, so right now, it's right.
Obviously, it's going to be what impacted parents little groups, right? They're gonna be sharing what they did. Some people are more communicative than others. But even the reality of it, that can get very long. And after a while, you stop putting it becomes like, yeah, it's quite hard. So it would be great to have, somebody with a facilitating team who actually goes and doesn't fully compile and say, hey guys, based on everything that you said, it's not just, well, not but some things text that we told us.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Imagine, does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. And I'll ask you before we, break the lecture.
I'm gonna try to keep this succinct. So we had the NPO screen pretty, 45, like really quickly, but what's obviously the education, you know, those presenters, you're gonna present information, you know, obviously funding the facilitators and communications to reach parents, that's pretty individual. We also talked about like we have a group thought about it as a pilot project. So selecting a school, and that's really if one of the assumptions, thinking about who our parents more likely to trust. Okay. So we thought school, and going to the owner. And then so outputs, thought about things like obviously putting on the event, having a registry of, you know, with people came, but also we're documenting the number, getting some data in there. And then also collecting communication for follow-up methods, whether not assuming what people have asked
process too, so we may have to do more wrong approach, whether, and this goes into the verification of, surveys, all calls.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Can you go back and talk me through your outputs again?
Sure, and I think sometimes I.
No, that's okay.
And outputs, but the output of like identifying and partnering with the stakeholder. Obviously, working with that stakeholder, sort of gauges of successful event, for parents in attendance, number of children. We're also doing toy drive, so the number of toys that we were to bring in and distribute. So those are some of the things that we had. And then obviously the broader outcomes of actual broader change and parents that be able to follow it through. And also potentially help for wanting to follow through, but unable to follow through because we face some challenges that oh, like okay, what's presenting the problems? Why is it really hard? And it's just stick the straight and then also, and this may require like a distant round of follow-up of like actual buy-in from the children themselves, because it may start out like the parents just having to like implement, but do we see a change with children actually wanting to engage in things other than
No, that was great. I think your last point, you all were actually touching on an approach which we call social and behavior change. So there you go. So that I would not necessarily classify that as an outcome, but that's actually a very useful tool to understand why people either adopt a new behavior or don't adopt it, right? And so actually that kind of data collection, because it will be a form of data collection, would be very useful to gather before you do your screen-free toy drive and before you host your training, right? So this is a slight digression because I also have experience doing social and behavior change work, but oftentimes we assume that what's stopping somebody from adopting a new behavior is they don't know, they lack the knowledge. And oftentimes people do know, right? Oftentimes, so if somebody says, why are you still smoking? We assume they must not know that it's bad for them. I don't think that there are many adults alive right now who don't know that smoking a cigarette can be very harmful for their health, right? There are other factors that are either prohibiting them from adopting a new behavior, or so they can't either quit that behavior or they can't take up a new behavior. And so kind of understanding, like designing for behavior change, you want to do at the start of your project, because what you might find is if you don't check that assumption, right? You design a project, you spend all your money, you spend all your time, and then the community's like, actually, we knew that tablets were really harmful for our children, but what do you want me to do? I'm a single parent and I have to work from home, and it's the only thing that I can use to keep my child busy while I'm working, right? So that's not an issue of knowledge. That's an issue of maybe like access to support or something else, right? So you want to do that at the beginning to help frame the work that you're going to do. So I love that y'all discuss that. I would shift it from thinking of it as an outcome, and it's like it's a data collection tool to inform the design of your project.
I also want to touch on, we look at the outputs. Those things like number of parents in attendance, number of toys distributed, those are more indicators to your outputs. So it's the way that we're going to measure that this one. Right. Yeah, so the output is the host the toy drive. How do we measure that? We track and we monitor the number of toys distributed, the number of children who attended, the number of, and then our means of verification will have that within, right? So we have our distribution check, let's say, or something like that. And the photos and all of those other highlight, I don't see it there. You mentioned something about again, the behavioral change, children, the sustainability of it, like children choosing the Montessori toy, which is, and I would like to see that as an outcome of the behavior change of not just the parents, but the children. Yeah, wanting to make these changes. So I think that, yeah, we did a fantastic job. I think that we all were able to show the lot of our your project and program, so screen-free Bahamas.
Not totally screwed.
Not totally screen-free, just for our little ones. And if there aren't any questions, yeah, let's break for lunch. And obviously, we can pull in on the side if you have other questions, but you have questions specifically about this. Yeah.
What's the lunch
Handing it over
process?
to you.
Yeah, so Dr. Hamilton, your guest in time for lunch.
Perfect timing.
But we will break for about an hour. So lunch is next door.
Yeah.
Yeah, so lunch is next door, but feel free to grab your lunch and head back over, or you could have it over there. And we will sort of wave the flag for everyone to come back at the end of that period. Zoom folks, we hope that you will pop back on the things for the remainder of the afternoon session.
The wonderful world of data.
So that discussion on data is paramount, really, really important. And I definitely had some questions about how the process of good M&E can strengthen fundraising aspects that I would love to ask before we go, because I think the question that's always on our mind, how do we use this to better position ourselves for fundraising? So it's just a quick prompt.
Yeah.
I will be picking
Great.
you all screens about that. So yeah, we have vegan options. So feel free to do that, and we'll be back in a minute.
Thanks, everyone, for your engagement. And we're coming back at, what time do we? One. We said 1 o'clock. We're off time. Yeah.
So Zoom, we will be back. Thank you guys so much, and we hope to see you when we get back from lunch. We're not
Thank
gonna
you.
do that.
Hey, Stefan. Hello?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, you saw my note. Could you send me a copy of what we did, please?
Yes, we'll do.
Appreciate that, sir. See you after lunch.
Well, hopefully we are all good to go. After lunch is in the tricky space, but I have faith that we will push through. And as we mentioned, we're ending at 3, so we don't have too much more to go. This training has been particularly exciting for me. Let me just put that out there. But great stuff. But this segment that I'm told is on data, I think is another one of the deficits that exist in the country. And I think that our work, all of the work that we all do, definitely, if we give attention to all data related things, could only strengthen our functions and our operations. So we got an hour and a half or so. Let's make the best of it.
Let's get into it. All right, thank you for giving up part of your lunch and coming back early. I hope that lunch was light enough that we don't fall into post-lunch feelings of fatigue. But we have a few different, well, we have one hopefully fun exercise that contributes to us feeling a bit less. So with that said, I just wanted to quickly remind us about our log frame that we were just working with. And I'm not sure if we said it at the start, that's okay. But what we're really sharing here is kind of the structure for a comprehensive M&E system. Okay, So with an M&E system, you would have your framework, which is, that's okay, which is a log frame or a logic model or a theory of change, if we have not introduced you. And then you would have your M&E plan, which we're going to talk about in the next slide. And then we get into data. So how do we collect our data? How do we analyze our data? How do we report out on our data? And how do we manage our data? So if you are able to put in the work, if you have the resources and the capacity to build out your M&E system, you're going to be in a really solid place. Okay, so just a reminder, I'm going to flip back to this in a little bit because I think it'll be useful for us, but let's talk about M&E plans. So does anybody have familiarity with an M&E plan? Somewhat. Do you want to share?
The most familiarity I have with a few years back. Apparently in the US, fair labor, international fair labor nonprofit, and sort of given the responsibility to put together a framework for an M&E book for international labor inspectorates to incorporate child labor into their broader inspection policy, so that I do a bit to M&E best practices, ILO standards, and things like that. So the M&E plans that I recall, they sort of broke down, obviously most of the time drawing from best practices, and were tweaked to the specific fields. Again, sort of having either working from either both and working for the theory of change or like a logic model, and breaking it down similar to like the matrix that you had, the outcomes, the indicators, and it can be very long. Of like, you know, all the subparts of various activities, and things like that, and then obviously reporting goals, and things like that.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Yep. So we have a chat, Stefan. I don't know if you want to, can you check the chat just to make sure no one?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So yes, thank you. So an M&E plan, as it says here, it's a table that builds upon your log frame, right? Or your theory of change, but in this instance, we're going to say our log frame. And it outlines your key M&E requirements for each indicator or assumption, but really an indicator, okay? So it's going to look at your definitions of your data, right? So I wrote down a note. There was one team that said something, and I wrote down, how do you define this, right? It was parents are invested in the well-being of their children. And I was like, what does well-being mean, right? We have to define what well-being means. So that's, we'll talk about that, but that's a definition. Your sources of your data, the methods and your timing of your data collection, who's responsible and what they're responsible to do, who's the intended audience of this information, right? And then how are we going to use this data? So we were just having a side conversation with Vanessa, and we were saying, you know, you could collect data from here until the end of your day, but you shouldn't, and you don't have to, right? So there are lots of things that can be collected for data, but if it's not contributing to a better understanding of how your project or your program is working towards its goal, then it's not useless, but you are diverting your resources into something that's not going to be very beneficial for you. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. This is a little blurry because I had to screenshot it from a manual, but this is a template. This is actually from an IFRC, so an International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies M&E guide. And this is the template, the standard that they tend to use for their M&E plan. So you'll see here that it has a column for your indicators, okay? And an indicator is simply a unit of measurement that helps us determine what progress is being made, right? So this is why I wanted us to flip back to this one. If we remember, let's take a look at the left column, second column. So an output indicator for this project is that 500 grade 5 and 6 students with low reading proficiency complete a reading summer camp, right? So we are saying that we will host a reading summer camp, and our output is that we will have 500 who complete a reading summer camp. And you can't see it because it's kind of blurred out, but the indicator for the output is number of students completing a reading summer camp, right? So that is a measurable number. We can measure this. We can say that there are 500 students who completed this. Okay. If we actually achieve our targets, right? And that's a whole other discussion. If we look at outcomes, their outcome statement is that it will improve reading proficiency among children in grades 5 to 6 by 20% within 3 years. That's very smart. It's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's realistic, it's time bound. Okay. And then their indicator, maybe this is meant to say levels of reading proficiency amongst children, right? And it's important because as I read that, I was like, how are they going to prove that? You can look at your means of verification, and your means of verification says that they're going to have 6 monthly reading proficiency tests using the National Assessment Tool. Okay, so they're going to be collecting data at set intervals to verify if they've reached this indicator. Okay, so with your M&E plan, it goes a little bit further. And how you would fill this out, you would write your project goal or program goal here. You would write your indicators in this column. So your outcome 1, what's your indicator 1A, indicator 1B, assumption 1A. And then how are we defining our indicator? So parents are invested in the well-being of children. How would we define well-being? Let's take a stab at it. How would we define well-being? So in our last example where we were talking about screen-free Bahamas, and we were saying that our parents, after going to support groups, will be invested in the well-being of their children. How would you define? And there's no right or wrong answer. This is a completely hypothetical. Screen-free Bahamas does not exist. To take a stab, how would you define well-being? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Katrina, you had your hand up, I think.
Oh, did I?
No, you did not. So I thought you went like this.
Oh, maybe I did that wrong. I would say, again, in this context, it could be parents who are actually interested in ensuring that their child has, really developing well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's great. If you remember our problem statement, we said that there were incidents of maladjusted behavior. So maybe well-being means that we're seeing positive behaviors in children, and we would still need to define what positive behaviors mean. Edua? Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. That ties back into the point that I was making, that there might be multiple projects that are working towards a common goal. And sometimes there are national standard indicators of what we want to see tracked, right? So you might want to pull that and include it in your project. I think it would be helpful to then indicate that this is a, National Ministry of Education indicator that we are feeding into or something like that. Yep.
You might be gonna look for children who are doing this
And then the time they traffic to totally different.
Yeah.
It went by private and national,
Yep.
whatever. Then you would actually be able to find data, because otherwise you would be
Searching.
for something that's out there.
Yeah, I agree.
And then after.
Yeah.
Let's say if you bring something back, but now, can you say that you're listening and helping with their comprehension? And then maybe you could test something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of the, when you look at something like that, especially when it comes, if you're using the data that coming through, going that, it's not really how they evaluate, right? These are, if they're evaluated based on relevant different things, it makes sense. If they're able to care and regurgitate all right, what they hear, or answer based on what they hear and answer directly, then that's how it's like.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's how I, what are sometimes work, are you actually, yeah, you are never going to be doing how they. Yeah.
This is a safe space that you would tell us how you really feel with your experience in this.
It can sound where I agree. I think it's helpful to tie into bigger research.
Mhm.
I would really think that, unfortunately, I think because I depend on your approach, especially when you have to find out how they actually evaluate, and we figure out if the data is accurate.
Yeah. So hold on to those thoughts. You are actually like 3 slides ahead of where I am, but that's going to feed into a very useful conversation. No, don't apologize. I'm happy to know that we're on the same track. So that's great. But keep those thoughts, because we're actually going to talk about secondary data and the importance of making sure that it's reliable and credible information that you are receiving from a secondary partner. Okay, so your M&E plan is also going to talk about how you define and how you measure this. Then it's going to look at your data collection methods or sources. So how are you going to collect this data, right? So we're saying that we are going to, our outcome, we are going to track the percentage of parents who report an increased support of their children's well-being. So how are we going to track this, right? That seems arbitrary, but we need to define our tools. How are we going to track this? It might be that you need to do some kind of baseline assessment, which means before you start an intervention, you do a bit of a survey to understand their views about children's wellness. And then after they've been exposed to your program, you come back and you do an online survey. And that way you can track the changes that you can hopefully attribute some of it to your project, right? But this column is like, how are we going to collect this data? What sources are we going to collect this data from? And then frequency and schedule. So how often are we going to do this, right? And this comes back to, I think, the point that Stefan was making earlier, which is like, I am building this plane as I'm flying it. I don't have time to figure out when I'm going to like collect monitoring information or monitoring data. This M&E plan helps you build that in right from the start. You know that you are saying once a week, I'm collecting data on this indicator, or once a quarter, or once a month, or whatever it is that best suits your project or your program. It's already outlined here. So you already know that that needs to be built into the work that you're doing. Okay. Who is responsible for this? So at one point, maybe your field officer might be telling you field reports. They might be feeding you field reports. That goes to, let's say, the program director who writes the executive report, or whatever this structure is, right? Like, who is responsible for capturing this data and who's responsible for reporting out on this data? And that's important because years and years ago, I saw this saying that I always jumble it in my head, but it's like, everybody wanted something done. It's going through like, everybody thinks somebody else is going to do it, but actually nobody ended up doing it, right? So unless you're very clear on who is responsible for doing what, it might not get done. And then the last thing, which is equally important, is how are we using this information and what is the audience, right? Are you going to present your executive summary report to your WhatsApp group? No, because they're not going to read it, okay? By the time they get through all of the good morning, praise Jesus messages, they are not paying attention to your executive summary report, okay? Likewise, are you going to send a quick TikTok to maybe the head of your funding organization? You may in this climate, but you might not, right? So you have to be aware of how you're going to tailor that data and that information and what it's going to be used for. Is it going to be used for, we need to check in once a month for our project. We need to check in to see how our community center that we built is being used, because that's going to inform our decisions around what we're doing next quarter, right? Maybe it's monthly, maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's, we can evaluate this at the end, but you have to put in that work to think about how you're using your data and who it's going, how you're using your data, how you're presenting your information, and who is it going to, because all of that dictates the format that you use. Any questions? Okay, good stuff. Okay. So, talking about data. This is hopefully going to be fun. I'm going to ask Andrika to support me here. This morning, some of you were handed some sheets of paper with some data collection instructions on it. And it was on, for those who joined maybe afterwards, it was on these lovely toys, my children's birds. They like to consider it. For those on Zoom, I'm sorry you weren't able to participate. But what we're going to do is ask you to report out on your findings, and then we're going to do some work with that data. Okay. So maybe let's start. I think we're going to do okay. So we'll start with
I can't type on the thing. I'll type it in.
and can you just read what your data collections are and how you find it? Andrika is going to be taking notes on the file.
This one.
What type of tool? Okay.
We did the survey with 3 trainings and things.
Okay.
My first participant. So from the snap listing.
Okay.
So the question was, I like your face. Choose. Yeah, you read your question.
Choose your favorite snack from the options below. And those options were food, chip, party, patty.
It's me and Amanda being silly. Mhm.
What is the possibility that a child would play with this toy?
Okay.
My first participant chose, I don't know, but the other options were A, unlikely, and C, very likely.
Mhm. Yeah, you can go.
Okay. My second participant also chose from the favorite snack, the options, fruit. Yeah. What is the possibility that a child would play with this toy? They chose through unlikely, I don't know, very likely.
They choose very likely.
They chose very likely.
Great.
Participant 3. From choose your favorite snack from the options below. Fruit, chips, funny time and sweet. And they chose fruit.
Y'all being honest with this survey answers. Because I was choosing Hottie Potty.
The second part, what is the possibility that a child would play with this toy? The first one would have been unlikely, the next, I don't know. My participant three chose very likely.
Let's move to,
How many birds are there in the city? How many dead birds are there in the city? How many of the bird houses might be free? Thank you.
So my question, I have a question to you before I start to answer the question, how do you use this document? So I will read it. If you're using a number of different ways, you can use it by action. How many birds are there?
The checklist.
Yes, yeah. Okay.
No, don't change it. Don't change it.
Yeah, everything. No, I can trick. I just wanted to get. You are the one.
I have described only the verbs. They have what to do with that.
Okay.
They are different, they are letters, they're different colors. They're all different. One is sleeping, one is angry, one is sad. Only three of the houses.
So interesting. Everybody will talk about it.
One is sleeping, one is sad. What was the last bit?
Angry, sleeping, sad. Angry.
And three of the houses. And three of the houses that were doing that. And four of them. All kinds of.
Okay.
Three houses.
The differences as well. Similarly noted, one how to cover color. You know, that some of the one or, you know, but again, require further questioning. Unit investigation. I noted how many feather types are different. Sometimes and some and then there are ways to also different positions. So I noted that as well. I also noted that four in the red box, all the way to the looks more like rubber.
Okay.
And you have feet, like the other ones, and it has purple on the wings and blue on the chest, and other,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I noticed sort of like similarities. Obviously, selecting different features, and we work on.
Anything.
I didn't go into all the something like this. How it's going to be, don't put it, like.
It's close to five.
Oh, come on.
Everything that we do is really actually why, when the more we display the instructions, if you display
So, hold on. He is going to be a TV. I'm so all of that to be a boy. The first time was how old are the here's boy and a girl. Oh. Okay, we don't children enjoy the sport. So I asked, what sports do they enjoy? So along with the bird, that they also talked about. Did I get okay, I have my thoughts, but I actually want to ask you, what stood out for you from this? There were some things that stood out to me, right? So you said there was a driver, and you knew there was a driver. You can't find this driver. Walking in our house. There's actually an orange powerful rubber duck. So you said there was a rubber in your car.
I didn't get a part, but for me, and just listening, I would automatically be like, this is something wrong when it's time to analyze it, because when things are so different, like how do I pull this together? Let me figure it out. That's like the first thing from my mind. The heck am I gonna say? Just make it.
What are the things that I was trying to see what difference on what I was doing, right? Pretty smart, but yeah, I was pretty smart. And then you can go back to it, add it, additional information. Yeah, so a variety of things, there are a variety of data points. Was there one question that didn't stood out? Major growth. Yes, the one about. Why are we asking what your favorite song is when we're looking at what? Okay, so we put that in purpose to reiterate the point that we can provide data on having. You have to make sure that it's part of the focus and relevant to what you are trying to understand. That is accurate, yeah. You mean, you know, that you need to get it. You need to go up to as a relationship with you.
I'm on mango diet. We sure would. Diverse intelligence, all kinds of things. We have a project that proves the intelligence of a chestnut tree. So there you go.
You Laughlin is true.
We can unpack that.
Yeah.
So, yes, there may be instances where the type of food that you consume is somehow correlated to the choice that you make, but not for this particular sector. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So that also, one of the questions that was putting in here, I mean, how are we, what are we trying to get information on? Let's be very intentional and mindful in the same mind what we want to get. And then, so to your point, Stephanie, on it, how are we going to analyze it, right? I think what Vanessa said about needing like parameters around what we're trying to assess and understand would be critical. But actually, all of these different data tools are useful because you can triangulate your data. Okay, so that's a process of kind of looking at your data and trying to see if it is accurate and valid, if you're a reliable source by confirming what you discovered based on other data that you collected, right? So I was the key informant interview. We have people who observe, right? We have somebody who did a secondary video review, right? So they looked at the instruction manual for the boy. Why I still have this? I'm the nerd part, and I was like, one day this will be helpful when my kids learn how to play with this board. So I kept it. But in the instructions, it talks about staffing, which you both mentioned, and I shared as an expert. Oh, my kids staff with this board, right? So we have secondary data here that's saying you can use this board as staff. You observed it, or you heard from the key informant that my kids staffed these boards. And I don't know if actually anybody played with them, but somebody might have touched it and staffed them, right? And so then you observe yourself, you have done that. So you can use different types of data collection tools to triangulate the data that you're receiving, right? And to kind of validate what you're going to study in the house. Okay. So thank you for indulging us in that. This was just a fun little activity that we thought might help to drive home all of the points that came out through our conversation. And actually, the main point that I want to make is that data collection is for everybody. You all did it. We all did it in different ways, using different tools. No prior experience, I don't think. I don't know if you all have this toy in your house or not, but no prior experience with this toy. You came in, we gave you a tool. Obviously, it is best practice to do training to familiarize your data collectors with the tools that they would use, but you were able to come and do it. And so we're driving home the point that M&E is for everybody, okay? Everybody can be involved in collecting data, but in your M&E plan, you wanna make sure you assign your responsibilities on who's going to do that, okay? So let's get into M&E, data, the wonderful world of data, a little bit more. Before I switch my slide, I will ask, can anybody tell me what's the difference between data and information? Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm. Interesting. Hmm. And you don't think that information can be backed up?
Let's see, anybody else? This is not like oh, that was me. I was like, oh, someone's talking. It was me.
I'd like to try.
Yeah, sure.
May Stewart. Yeah, the difference between information and data, that's the question that you're asking.
Correct.
Good. Data is just the collection in numbers, but the information is what data informs you, the impact. How do you pull it together, and what do you see as a result of all of this data? For example, you have out of a total of 10 people who might drink Coke soda. Out of that 10, you get maybe 6 that drink Coke soda and 4 that do not drink Coke soda. So your information, I would say, more people drink Coke soda. So it's what you pull from it, what you understand by it, or I could say even what you interpret from it. So that's my contribution.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Millamay. Yeah, that's excellent. I will clarify one thing, that data does not just have to be numbers, okay? So a term, so data is raw facts or figures, right? So it can be facts or figures. It's not just numbers before they've been processed or analyzed. So exactly like what Ms. Willamay was saying. Information is that we have now taken that data, we've processed it, and we've analyzed it for reporting or use. Okay, so thank you, Ms. Willamay, that was very helpful, right? So we collect data, and then by our activities of processing and analyzing it, we turn that into information. All right, so we're not collecting information, we collect data, and then we turn it into information that can be used. Okay. So let me move this down. Oh no, you saw my little. Is it a way for it to go like lengthwise or no? It's okay, I'll pull it to the bottom. Okay, so I think, Katrina, this might be where you were starting to get into like different types of data. So there are a few types of data. So the first we'll look at is primary data versus secondary data, okay? So in our little activity that we just did, what would be an example of primary data? Primary data is data that's collected directly by members of the project or the program of the organization. So, and then secondary data is relevant data, which has already been collected by another agency or organization. So what we just did, what would be an example of secondary data? The manual, exactly, right? I didn't produce this manual. This manual, somebody already did this work, right? So what y'all did was you looked at the manual and you reviewed it and you pulled out some pertinent facts, pertinent data that we could use, okay? All the others were primary data collection tools, right? So you got that data, you observed it, okay? You did an interview with me. You asked the experts, all right? You were able to explore these tools, or these toys rather, okay? So why do you think you would want to use a combination of both primary and secondary data? If secondary data is available, and that's a whole other conversation about our access to data here in the Bahamas that Ajua was leading us into. But let's assume that we do have secondary data available. Why would you choose to use primary and secondary data? Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so it can be supportive, it can be different information that you're gathering. Okay, any other thoughts on that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful. Exactly. Exactly. So that's what my little cartoon is showing. If it comes up, right. So this is just a little cartoon and they're saying, you know what, we could spend all of our budget on surveying 1,000 households, or we could get the data from the government and analyze it over tea and cookies, and we save our money. We save our human resources, we save our financial resources, and we have data that already exists that we just need to review. Now, that does not mean that we are saying do one or the other, okay? So when you're collecting data, you should be doing a combination or mixed methodology, right? There's another reason to that, and I think I want to bring it out with the toy example, and I did not think when I did this activity that it would be so useful, but it is so useful. So my friend Ajua said, there's a red duck, and there's a red bird, and we were all like, yeah, there is a red bird, right? And then Amanda was like, I wasn't sure. I don't know, maybe. And then Vanessa said, I don't think actually it was a red bird. It was actually an orange duck with multiple colors, right? So we had 3 different interpretations of what this red bird was. Yeah, we can show it. We can take it out. This is the bird in question. Exactly. Exactly. This is very clearly an orange multicolored duck. It was not a red bird. And I actually, this is why I said I thought it was interesting, because nobody questioned whether they were, I mean, obviously a duck is a bird, but there was nobody who had paused and said like, well, these 4 are similar, but this one is actually quite different. And are we considering this a bird like the other birds, right? But the point is that if we had stopped, if we didn't have our mixture of data collection tools and data that came from different sources, we would have all walked away from here thinking there was a red bird in there, right? So now we know, hey, we need to come back. We need to revisit this. We need to really examine this. Is this bird red? Yes, there's a red spot on its head, but does that make it a red bird, right? So using a mixed bag of data collection tools, using primary and secondary really helps to validate your data, okay? It really helps to add credibility. And we have to always remember that try as we might, there are those who view qualitative data as inherently biased, right? Because there is your human interpretation of what you're seeing, right? It's not figures. It's not like there are 5, let's say 5 birdhouses there, right? That is a figure, we know that. But somebody might come and say, well, actually, qualitatively, is the orange one really a birdhouse because it doesn't have a cover on it? And I don't know if it meets the definition of what a standard birdhouse should be, right? So using mixed methodology also helps you to address some of those things that might come up, okay? Any questions on that? You also want to make sure that you're collecting data from a reliable source, right? So if we were really far advanced, we might have had Sekou come in here and give you a talk about these toys, and he might have never even seen these toys before. We could have collected that data, but would that been from a credible source? Because he had never had any interaction with this before, right? So all that glitters may not be gold. And so we have to be very mindful of this as we work through collecting data and using types of data, particularly primary and secondary. Stephanie, I think you had a question. So that was what you did. Everybody except for the 2 who read the manual, that was primary data collection. You did that. You collected that data on your own. The secondary data was looking at the manual that already existed. You did not make that manual. Okay. Okay. Yes.
In terms of like, when I was from the data, I think, but it wasn't even what we want to say, what it is, right? What it like, as you were saying, the national. And the focus of what it's on, still really think that, right? But then their sensitive. When you go deeper and realize that their only way of evaluation is in a very narrow.
Yep.
Approach to learning, which is something that we've been talking about science, and things that we have to be doing very well.
Mhm.
But, so I guess in that case, would it then be, it's not necessarily that's not something viable, it does not adhere to standards.
Right.
that we have set.
Yes, so thank you for that. Yes, that is also important. It could be from a reliable source, but incorrect, right? So all of this needs to be, you have to be very critical when you're looking at secondary data as well, because it would be easy for somebody to say, hey, this is from, expert on toys Amanda. And you should not just take that as gospel. You should be very critical with how you review it, understanding how I applied my methodology and how I defined what the data is that I'm sharing with you and the information that I'm sharing with you. So yes, that's critical as well.
We have this problem with the study because what we offer are swim lessons on a regular basis. And it's part of the curriculum in the school, right? So it's in the school. And a lot of people offer swimming, okay, and they go in and do one lesson or maybe in the summer or something like that, and that's not like our program. So you can't compare, and sometimes they'll say like, they put, like I'll say, okay, let's just say you did 1,300 kids this year for certain lessons, but that was each one of those children had 8 lessons.
Right.
Right, you understand what I mean? So somebody would say, well, we did 25,000 children in preschool or something like that, and I said, but you gave more one lesson.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? You can't compare. Sometimes you have to be really careful what you're comparing.
Exactly.
And I'm not saying that we have the best and they don't have the best or whatever, but it's just different.
Exactly. It's different.
It's different. And when we first met with the Ministry of Education, there was another program that was finding that support and everything like that. And they talked about like survival swimming.
Right.
You see, and then we kept saying, well, we're not doing survival swimming. If you do our program, you will survive. It was like, so I'm just saying it's you really have to be careful what you're really selling.
Yep.
Very, very clear. And
Yeah.
people understand.
Yes, thank you. That is an excellent illustration of that point. Thank you very much. Yeah. Who wants to take a go at this? I think we know this one. The difference between quantitative data and qualitative data. Pardon? Say it. Say it. What is quantitative data? Let's define that. Yep. Numbers. Okay. Looking at numbers here. What's qualitative data? Actually, yes. That's the next step, but yeah. So
the data she gave us, very descriptive.
yes, very descriptive. Yeah. So quantitative measures and explains what's being studied using numbers. So for example, 16 of the 20 persons who attended the M&E training today took part in eating lunch provided by the organizers. Okay, we know this because maybe we had 20 sandwiches out and 16 were eaten, right? Although some might say that somebody ate 4 sandwiches. So does that really prove that 16 persons eat? But anyway, qualitative data looks at measuring and explaining what is being studied using words, right? So according to a feedback captured during a focus group discussion, the majority of participants were satisfied with the lunch provided and thought that it was nutritious and filling. Okay, so same thing that we're looking at. We are looking at lunch provided here. Quantitative data is the numbers, right? It's measuring what happened using numbers. So 16 people ate lunch today. Qualitative data is using words. People were satisfied with the lunch. They thought it was filling. They thought it was nutritious. Okay. I will be the first to admit that when I first started out, I loved qualitative data because I have like an aversion to numbers. I was not a math person
not that this has anything to do with math, but numbers, I was like, oh, statistics, I don't really want to get into it. But it is so important, if you can, to use a combination of quantitative and qualitative data. And does anybody want to try to explain why that would be important?
I shouldn't become like, I'm too
No,
excited.
no. Excitement.
Can I just point out, like, so, for example, I could go and, like, I broke, and I'm saying this on a recorded thing, but
Okay.
I broke my nose soda pack that me and my wife have today.
Oh.
And I can only break it when we come here.
Ooh.
But, I could go home and say, oh, lunch was nutritious, filling, because we had Subway, conveniently leaving out the
soda.
ginger ale with however many grams. Right.
Oh, someone is really calling you out, that's there.
Was sort of hidden under the wrapper of language. So I think that what quantitative data, of course, will allow us to have a closer look at maybe some of the nutritional facts, for example, and give us a measure. So even if people say a particular thing, we have an opportunity to measure it against some established.
Yep.
I was not with that.
No, and now you're on record, so I hope your wife is not watching. Yeah. Yep. Yep, it is necessary.
I think, there are young people out there that, for a lot of our programs, we actively, provide. But also we are very careful about making different things in the news. And do.
Yeah. Yep.
So, but if you think about it, maybe they are summer camp. And they do up to 100 children. Free, you know, 100 children free there. That's the quantitative. The qualitative is they get active feedback from the children and the parents. Who and the children may have to do with okay, I have a terrible one big knockdown.
Would not have been me.
Video. And but on the other side is that you have a majority, you have some who would say, I love this experience that it became more confident.
Yeah.
Right? Or parents saying my child is more confident now, not just in what they work, but
Yeah.
also in how they carry themselves, how they interact socially. So that would be the quality.
So I have a note here that I think is really important. So it says, a mixed methods approach is often recommended that can use the advantages of both. So you measure what happened with quantitative data, and you examine how and why it happened with qualitative data, right? So it's almost like it's telling two sides of the same story to really build up some robust data that you can then process and analyze, right? So there's a space for both of them.
Yeah, I was thinking to add that in some cases that the quantitative just does not do what the qualitative.
Yeah.
And it's not people use you know, some of decision making.
Yeah.
And some form that we definitely be number.
Yeah.
But when in terms of as an agent of development, you need to implement things.
Yeah.
You need to have some more substantial information.
That is
I'm looking at research, like in Haiti, there are 70% of school failure. But then, okay, so we just need to provide more money or what, so that's what some fund will do. But then when you go into the classroom, you find out ethnographic studies to see the classroom practices and to see how the kids have difficulty to interact with the teacher because they are in French and the classroom as opposed to their home language. So you have the completely different set of data and only qualitative can be included.
That is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. That is a really great example of the strength and sometimes the limitations of different types of data and why it's important to use both of them if you can. Thank you for sharing that. That was really great. Okay, so we're going to touch very briefly on some data collection methods and tools. And this is just kind of this is not an exhaustive list at all, by the way, as Andrika said earlier. The field of monitoring and evaluation is always growing, always evolving. So there are new additions all the time. In fact, it's interesting because when I was thinking about this, I was like, you know what, social media did not exist in the way that it exists now 10 years ago, right? So who would have thought that we would be using social media to access like news or information like that, right? So certainly when this document was written, which was 2011, that I pulled some of this from, social media was not what it is now. But anyway, so some of the different data collection methods and tools, as you can see here, we have a secondary data review that some of you did, focus group discussions where you would bring in members of your population who you may be reaching with your work and having a very focused conversation, asking very specific questions to get their feedback or to get their experiences. You might do a key informant interview with a toy expert like myself. We had a survey done. Their beneficiary feedback forms. You can do direct observation, pre and post tests, community meetings, a checklist. This is a picture from my former life. This was Jamaica. I think we had a project with some farmers and we were doing interviews with some of the farmers to understand how the project impacted their productivity. But important, I think, with all of your data collection methods and tools is an awareness that you can and you should use different tools, right? We talked about the importance of triangulation, and each tool might collect something a little bit different. But coming back to understanding in your M&E plan, what are the parameters? What are we trying to understand? Because you could design a survey that's the best survey in the world, but if it's not focused on the information that you need, it's useless, right? So you need to operate within parameters that you would flesh out in your M&E plan, in your framework that helps you to understand what you're trying to track. Just because I want to know if I can do what Stefan does, I'm going to try. Okay, so what's okay? Okay, so we talked about data collection. So we collect our data. Now we're going to analyze our data. Okay, so these are some key points that we want you to remember for data analysis. So you have to plan for data analysis. It can't just happen, right? Or it can, but it might be ad hoc. It won't be targeted. You might feel like you're already drowning under the weight of all the other work that you're doing. So you should plan for it. There should be a purpose. You should know the purpose of your data analysis. You should know the frequency. You should know who's responsible, and you should know the process. Okay. So what this means are, it should be appropriate to your outcomes or your objectives that you want to analyze as set out in your log frame or in your M&E plan, right? It should be intentional. It should be specific. And it should be structured and planned for, and it should not be an afterthought. Like, oh, we collected all this data. Now what are we going to do with it? You should be collecting data already knowing in the back of your mind how you're going to use this. What's the purpose? Who's going to be the audience for the different type of data that you collect? Okay, how often are we going to do it? Who's responsible for doing it? So these are just four key points that we wanted to put in your brain. Oh, now I have to. Okay, there we go. And then these are some stages of data analysis, right? So we've collected our data. Andrika took the data that all of you collected. She put it on a Word document. We've collected our data. Okay, so how are we going to prepare that data? If Andrika was sharing to the screen, we might see that she was just kind of like haphazardly taking notes, right? So would that be useful if she turned it over to our M&E specialist who wasn't in the room. She might be like, what? Hot potty? What is this? I don't even understand what this data is, right? So you need to prepare your data. You need to organize your data, right? You need to put it in a format and in a structure that is easy to work with. It's easy to manipulate. It's easy to it's malleable. You can work with this and it's structured. Okay. And then you want to get into how you're going to analyze this data and whether this data is, whether your analysis is going to be descriptive or interpretive. Okay, so what do you think I mean when I say descriptive versus interpretive?
You're just describing what you got. Like, basically, if you had 6 people, you did a survey that probably 10 people, 10 and 5 they like Coke soda, and 6 people said that they like
Ginger ale.
ginger ale. Sorry. And your analysis would be out of 10 people interviewed, 6 people like ginger ale.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the fee, 6 people like it, but 4 they did not, so we can assume that they like it.
Yeah, there might be assumption. So I have a note here, and that thank you, that is the point. So descriptive analysis focuses on what happens, while interpretive analysis seeks to explain why it occurred or what might be the cause, right? And they're both interrelated and they're useful in information reporting because oftentimes descriptive analysis informs interpretive, right? Stefan drank 6 cans of soda, right? I know, I'm just saying. So that's descriptive, right? Interpretive, we might be like, why? Right? We might seek to understand why he drank 6 cans of soda, right? Because his wife isn't here, he's feeling free. He's like, yeah, no one's gonna tell on me, right? This goes back to when I would manage projects and I had people reporting up to me, and Andrika can attest to this. One of my absolute favorite questions to ask when I read reports is, so what? And look, it's triggering her. So what? Okay, so what? What does this mean? How rude. So what? What does this mean? Okay, I had another project team and they would write the most beautiful descriptive reports. The bus came to pick us up at 8:03. It was white with a yellow panel on it. We drove down the road. There were multiple potholes. And I'm just like, get to the point. I don't need to know this. Thank you for this beauty. Like, I can picture it in my mind, but that's not helping me understand what I need to understand. This is not relevant to what we're trying to analyze and process here. Okay, so I love the question, so what? And I urge you, if you are not offended by this question, to use it when you write your reports. We trained 10 kids at summer camp. So what? What does that mean? What does that mean? Why do we care? How is that contributing towards you making your goal? What does it mean? So what? You hosted 10 NPO sensitization training. So what? What are people doing with that information? What is the change that you're hoping to see come out of there, right? And it's a way of pushing your thinking beyond just this reporting out on what happened. We built one community center, not that that's by any means not a miraculous feat, but so what? What is coming out of this? Okay, how is that feeding into what you're hoping to accomplish, your big lofty goal, your outcomes, right? And that's where descriptive and interpretive data analysis come into play, helps you to answer that, well, so what, right? A nicer way that somebody wrote it is, if so, why? But I prefer so what. Then you have the stage of data verification. Yeah.
Oh, I do. I access other people. Like Amanda, stoic, grace, and thank you for that. So much.
I agree that it's predominant.
we are, but they are, trust me. Yes. Yep, yep, they are. They're like, so what? What does this mean?
It's one I keep on, I think the triggers me every time I think about conversations with board members, we have enough for, we're like, boy, you should want to support the arts. And I'm like, why?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Why would they want to support the arts? Compared to what?
Mm-hmm.
Supporting the healthcare system,
Mm-hmm.
supporting like children who don't have children, like I'm trying to figure out why do you think everyone should support them?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you know, I guess that's not for them to answer.
I guess, but it's for both of y'all to answer. I would say that the board has equal responsibility for promoting the work that you do as much as you, who are the people who are doing the day-to-day work, so.
Absolutely, but it's more, so yeah, to your point of like the whole, it's so wide.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone should be doing this.
Mm-hmm. But why? So what? Yeah, it's your opportunity to like sell your story, to sell the good that you've done, right? It's really important, actually. Data verification, right? So we're back to our duck in question. We should verify that this was actually a duck and not a red bird, right? So we need to make sure that the data we collect, whether it's primary or secondary, is credible, it's from a reliable source, it is meeting the parameters that we use to measure our success, right? It's comparable. How are we presenting this data, right? How are we reporting out on it? We talked about different audiences and the way that you might want to tailor the way you present this data for your different audiences. So org sends out a weekly or monthly newsletter. Sometimes every 2 weeks, and that's a form of reporting, right? We are their stakeholders. They are doing this work for people in the Bahamas. They're sharing with us, hey, we've accomplished this, this, and this. We're bringing this to your attention, right? I don't think they're going to send that newsletter as their report to their donor, right? It might be something that they attach to their report, but that might not be the format that they use because the donor has different expectations and they're looking at it from a different lens. Yep.
I can just say about the donors and everything, when you're approached by somebody, I think I mentioned this one at a time, that they wanted to donate for people to help them with the environment, like the Bahamas and all that. And because it was during COVID, we got to speak to them a lot. And we convinced them that the Indian population, since 98% doesn't know how to swim, it'd be hard for them to appreciate saving the environment if they don't know how to swim. And so they now support us because they realize that they have to know how to swim before they can appreciate the environment. So sometimes people come in with good intentions, and if you don't have the data, like convince them to drop it here first,
right?
And then we can get to your goal that you want.
Exactly. Yeah. All of this, it's all tied into fundraising, tied into being responsible and accountable with your work. It's all linked, right? So I hope that we all walk away from here saying like, M&E is so important. And then lastly,
Don't laugh.
it's our moment to shine. Lastly, recommendations. That looks like it has way too many letters in there, but anyway, and action planning. Okay, so what are we recommending happens out of this data, right? So we're analyzing it. What are the recommendations? Because you're collecting data, you're analyzing data for a reason, right? And usually that's to inform decisions or to lure a donor or to whatever the case is. So what are our recommendations and what actions are we taking out of this? And then we've collected our data, we've analyzed our data, and now we want to talk about how we manage our data. Okay, so very quickly, 7 key considerations for planning your data management system. So how are you formatting your data? This is I would not call this simple, it's important. Are you saving it as org Emily presentation version 1? Or is it version 1 org Emily presentation, right? And that might seem trivial, but actually it's really important when you have multiple people who are looking to access that information and they don't know where they're supposed to be looking or what name they should be looking at. Also, when you have multiple people working off of a document, right? So the worst is you go, org Emily presentation final, org Emily presentation final 2, org Emily presentation. Well, how can it be final but version 2, right? So all of these naming conventions and how you're formatting, all important for how people around you use it, how you use it, how you're organizing your data, okay? So how are we storing it? How are we organizing it? Are we doing it by maybe our monthly reports, like January, February, March? Are we doing it quarterly? Are we doing it by themes? Like, how are we organizing our data? What is the availability? Like, how easy is it for somebody to access it? And that also ties into data securities and legalities. So if you are collecting data that has a lot of identifying information in it, right? Somebody's passport number or their national ID card or whatever the case is, you have a responsibility to secure that data, right? And to make sure that it's not accessed by somebody who should not have it, right? So with the Hurricane Dorian project that we did, we had a cash transfer element to it. We would take beneficiaries' information, and this was like very personal identifying information. We had to hand it over to the third party who we would distribute the money through. Every time I sent it, I had to put in a new password, and I had to share that password with only like 2 other people, right? So we built in all of these controls so that person's private information was as protected as it could be, right? So all of this we have to think about. There is a Data Protection Act here in the Bahamas. There's also data protection acts for information that you might get from outside of the Bahamas. So you have to be mindful of all of this. Information technology. So how are we using IT to go about managing our data, right? So are we using paper files? And sorry if anyone here has worked at government, but those big ledger books that the government loves to write in, and it's like as long as this, and they turn it over and they write in it, and that's just kind of pushed in somebody's office somewhere. Are we using that? Are we trying to use like a database, Microsoft Access? Like, what are we using? How are we using information technology to help us manage our data? This is relating to formatting. So how are we looking at our quality control and our version control? So we don't want to see version 1 through 15, right? Like, let's put in a system. This is a working folder. This is the final folder. If you're still working on a document, you keep it here. Once it is actually finalized, please put it here. And then who's responsible and accountable for this, right? And I say all of this, and my important takeaway is that if you put all of this in place, but it's not communicated to people, and it's not documented somewhere, and people don't know what's expected of them, all of this is useless. Right. So there's also the human element of sensitizing it with the people who are going to be using this. And what is my time on here? Wondering if I should skip my notes.
45 and to end with 3.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to skip this, but you will get this presentation. So if you're so inclined, you can look at it. And I just want to end with reporting. So this is a great quote from the IFRC M&E guide. Reporting is the most visible part of our M&E system, right? So if you think of our system, you have the framework, you have the plan, you have your data collection tools, and you have reporting. And that's usually what people outside of your organization see. That tells your story, okay? And that's where collected and analyzed data is presented as information for key stakeholders to use. And it's critical because no matter how well done data may be collected and analyzed, if it's not well presented, it cannot be well used. Okay, you can collect data from here until 5 years from now, but if it's not, and you might analyze it, but if it's not well presented, it's not going to be used. Okay. And then when it comes to reporting, some key considerations, very similar to what we talked about just now. Who is your audience? What's the purpose of this report? What's the frequency? What's the format? What's the responsibility? Who is responsible for this? All things that you want to keep in mind, right? So it's easy to just write a report, but if you keep these considerations in mind, it makes it that much more intentional and strategic and hopefully effective. So we're gonna stop there. We do have a handout that we will give out, but I would love to pause. We have 15 minutes and see if you have any questions. And also if you have additional questions after the fact, our email addresses are up on the board. It's Andrika@templetonworldcharity.org and Amanda@thepelagicgroup.com. Once again, not Amanda from Templeton Religious Trust. So while Andrika is handing this out, I will talk you through it. But do you have any questions about what I just covered? I'm sorry we did not have more time. I can tell everyone was really excited about it, but. Okay. I'm gonna grab one of these from, and do you want to talk them through it? Or do you want me to?
Good afternoon. I'd like to make a comment.
You want to fill out her? Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was very interested in the final part of this presentation and your point about once something is completed and there is a report or somebody is reporting, your question is, so what?
Yeah.
That I think is the most important aspect of what you did this morning. Because many times we go in, we do projects or we attend conferences, we go to meetings and we participate. And then somebody comes back and give a report of actually what happened. But you can pick up the program and find out what happened. But you want to know now, so what? We've done this or they have done that presentation. They've done that workshop or we attended the workshop, we represented at the workshop. So what? What is it now that we are going to do?
Yeah.
What was the purpose in the beginning? So tell me now, yes, we attended the meeting and they talked about A, B, C, D, and E. So what? How is this now gonna impact us or improve us or make us evaluate what it is that we're doing? So I think that bit is I think that's very, very important. And I'm glad you ended up with that. And that's very easy to do. The so what question might come across as being, like you said, very, I'm going to use another word, very aggressive, or maybe, I'm not going to say rude or very insulting, but you have to ask the question. You must ask the question, so what? We've done it now, so what? Okay, we 25 people, so what?
Yep.
Okay. All right, then that's my contribution. Thank you so much.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I'm glad that resonated with you. So Andrika just handed out what we're calling an M&E readiness checklist or template, and we put it in the chats on Zoom, so you can also access it there. Initially, when we thought we would have a little more time, we would have given you time to kind of work through this in person and then share. I don't think we have time. I know we don't have time for that. So we would ask that you really put some effort into completing this. This is really useful for you and for your organization. And then if you can, maybe you can take a picture of it or scan it and share it with org. And then obviously there can be a conversation with org.
We can also send the template to them. They could type it up.
Yeah.
And send it up.
Yeah. So really and truly, this is meant for you and your organization to reflect on what we shared. So do you have an M&E system in place? Do you have an M&E framework? Do you have an M&E plan? Do you have data reporting, data collection tools? Do you know how you're reporting out, right? And this is not to embarrass anybody by any means, but it's just meant to help you identify areas where you may need a little extra help, or we need to focus on this. We really need to build this out because it's going to be impactful and meaningful. So please do, take it home with you, work on it. We will email it as well and send it back. Andrika and I will as we said earlier, we will share this PowerPoint and we will also pull together kind of a resources folder with different toolkits or PowerPoints or websites that we think might be relevant to you. We were going to do that after we saw this, but I don't know if we will get that in time. So we'll just pull together things that we think would be useful for you.
If there's something specific, please email us, like if you want to know something about like indicator banks or whatever, something specific, we'll be sure to add that.
Yep. So I think that's it. If there are no further questions, thank you for being great on. Yes, we have a question. How did I become a toy expert? That is a great question. Yeah, you didn't question my credibility. Everyone just assumed that I was a toy expert. You just went with it. It's not for the faint-hearted, let me tell you. Any other questions or comments?
Can someone share, we had intended in our wrap up to do like a peak of the day, fit of the day, something we do with our kids, right? So I heard from, I think that was Ms. Stewart that said like a peak of her day was that question, the so what question. Let's not talk about the fit, but maybe being on Zoom. So does anyone want to share for us? It helps us to evaluate how well we did, right?
Yeah.
What the peak of the day, what resonated with you, something that you will definitely kind of take home and kind of ponder on and reflect on. Yes.
The toys,
Yeah.
actually, and realizing that those said was a red, but it's actually orange stuff. So the collection, you have to be very careful on how you look at the toys and how you observe and collect.
The data validation, data
Right.
verification, yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Anyone else? You assumed because the
I don't think a lot of and when you see not but and seeing like the rap across the board like so it makes you think of when someone goes out there and they not collecting the okay they have to go on to someone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice. So we're just building on that too, like there was a moment too that I realized, well, because no matter like the high tier, I'm sure but also the moment I think oh, we can touch them. Yeah, so it's also like the initial approach was it wasn't sure what the scope was, I wasn't what the acceptable boundaries were. So even though that was like it's something to think about like how to effectively engage in what you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah.
Zoomies, I just want you to know that he is offering up food that you cannot participate. We're sorry. We're very sorry that you're not here to join us.
Right.
But
You can hand it off to stuff.
yeah, we'll hand it back. Thank you so much for being a great audience. I hope this was helpful and informative.
So I just definitely want to express our gratitude to both of you. What I guess my kind of high point at the same time is monitoring and evaluation is one of those things that clearly there's a lot more, but in terms of really getting to the meat of it and what it means and facilitating a shared understanding of some of those terms. I feel like the president would, sorry. I think that this was really helpful and informative, but engaging.
because this is one of those topics that can become technical and feel very academic, but I think like from the birds to the activities, that was really helpful. I just want to echo them offering themselves as a resource for you to reach out to. Please take full advantage of it. I'm sure this is going to come up as we conclude the fundraising training, but from the perspective of a nonprofit project manager, one of the things I recognize in my work as well as working with other organizations is donors recognize when you have effective M&E structures in place, and the bigger the ask, the more likely you have to really have a lot of those concepts in place to make sure that the investments that are made are viable, and to the best of our ability within the scope of our sphere of our control, that they do what they set out to do. So this is one of those skills that enriches project management. It enriches the process of fundraising and broadens our horizons. It professionalizes what we do. It helps with the professional development of members of our teams so that they have things that make sense to them as well. It helps with public communications because now we have a logic framework. So if we're going if then what, people in the public who may not be plugged in on know how much they care about art or the power of art to really transform communities and help with the education of young people, all of these things can be a byproduct of giving attention to this space. I feel it is, I don't want to say undervalued, but it's one of those things where my hope is for other organizations, we're all here, so of course we get the value of this within the sector to see this is just as exciting as meet the funders. Like, yeah, let's talk about monitoring and evaluation as well, because when we meet those funders, this is their expectation, that we're going to be able to do this. And this is a gauge of how effective we're going to be at running our projects.
Putting on my funder staff, that is definitely something that we look for in
Right.
our proposals, that you have an M&E plan or some type of M&E structure. We always ask for outputs and outcomes and how the data that's gonna come out of your project.
Right.
So,
And I will
aware of that.
I will close by just saying that even in fundraising now, the conversation is just different when those it's less of I'm trying so hard to win you over and more of this sounds good, but let's actually think through how we can make it. Feels like more of a partnership, and it takes a lot of the pressure of I want to get all of that qualitative and make you cry about how beautiful what we're doing is, and it's like no, here's how we actually get to the goal and work our way through. So with that said, I want to wrap up so that we have time to clear out because it's 3 now. And I will be in touch with everyone. We will share the information and their contact details. The materials from the trainings as well as the recording will be up on our website. You can access it from orgbahamas.com/civil society. It's at the bottom. So that people don't just like, oh, they're gonna post it, like so they show up. But apart from that, everyone here is on the email list, I believe, so you could feel free to reach out with any additional questions. And thank you so much for those of you that have joined us via Zoom. Signing off. Everybody have a great day.